Bonsoir tout le monde. Good evening, everyone. We'll get the meeting started. Firstly, thanks to everyone for being here. This is usually when we have a lot of people in the room, it's because people aren't happy, but this is actually a happy discussion to have. So I'm glad to see a lot of people here to come and interested in the future of our recreational facilities here in the township. Item 1, roll call. All members of council are present. Adoption of the agenda. Motion to approve the agenda as presented. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Saucier, second by Conseiller Larin. All those in favor? All those opposed? Carried. Disclosure of pecuniary interest? No, seeing none. Item 4, reports from departments and council committees. Item A, Recreation Complex Information Report, Report PR 25-2019. That council receives this information, Report PR 25-2019, dated August 12, 2019, and the council provides direction to staff on how to proceed. Monsieur Leduc, Madame Guitard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members of council. Hello. Okay. As council recalls, on June 4th, we presented a report to council, an information report concerning the recreation complex, and the wish of, it's not working.
It's not that loud.
Because it's on.
On dirait que celui à Céline il est tout bas. Je sais pas. I don't know how the sound's carrying okay in the room from my microphone. We want to make sure that I see a thumbs up in the back, so you guys, Céline, if you want to try and speak, and we'll just make sure
Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to follow up. So as I was saying, the administration brought forward an information report to council on June 4th to express their wish to work with the Colliers Group and in order to see the next steps that council would like to see in a future report. And at that point, we got the direction from council to present another information report and a consultant report also at the same time, stating few different information concerning the next steps to go for the recreation complex, the timelines, to present different options also with combinations of facilities, a site plan revised, because as you recall, we did have a site plan, but it needed revision, and also include a financial strategy. So tonight is the night. So I'm happy to present the consultant that will be doing the presentation tonight, Mrs. Harminder Kaur, who is a senior project manager from the Collier Group. So I will let Harminder introduce her fellow colleagues for the presentation that you have received in your package late last week.
Welcome.
Thank you. Je vais faire une petite introduction en français, mais la présentation, ça se fera en anglais. Bonjour, c'est un plaisir de vous rejoindre ce soir. Je m'appelle Harminder, je suis ingénieur et gestionnaire de projet principal chez Colliers Project Leaders. En premier, je voudrais féliciter la municipalité de Russell d'être classée 6e parmi les meilleurs endroits à Canada pour vivre en famille. Madame Céline Guitard et Monsieur Jean Leduc nous ont confié le mandat d'explorer les possibilités pour le futur centre de loisirs et de présenter les coûts de chacun. Les options comprennent 6 différentes combinaisons d'arènes ou piscines ou théâtres. Aujourd'hui, nous présenterons ces options selon notre rapport et les coûts associés avec chacun. Je voudrais vous présenter mes collègues Surya Pulikal, consultant principal et architecte chez Colliers Project Leaders, et Robert Matthews, partenaire et architecte avec N45 Architecture. Ensemble, ils présenteront les détails de les options et les plans de site conceptuels. Nous attendons tous vos commentaires et questions et nous vous remercions pour cette opportunité. Ainsi, je le passe à Surya et Robert pour continuer la présentation et en anglais. Merci.
Merci.
Hi.
Yes, sir.
Hello. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for the introduction, Ravinder. So, in the next few minutes, I'll be walking you through the various concepts that we have developed for the proposed recreation center and giving you an overview of the capital and operating cost estimates that we have developed for the various options.
Can you just lift your mic a little bit? I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Oh, sorry.
It's not on. Lights on.
Oh, it's not. So should I push this?
Try it.
I'll try to speak up, please. So, sorry about that, and good evening, everyone. Today we'll be walking you through the various options that we have developed for the proposed recreation center, and we've developed some plans as well, and also the capital cost and operating cost estimates for those options. So I think first we will give you an overview of the programs included under the proposed options. We have developed 6 options. What is included under each option, and then we will take you through the plans of those options. And once the plans are done, then we will get into the capital cost estimates and the operating cost estimates. So the recreation center has 3 components, 3 main components. First is the auditorium. The next is the arena, and the other one is the swimming pool. So using these 3 recreation components, we have created 6 options. You can see from option 1 to 6. The tick marks indicate what is included under each option. So the option 1 will have a twin pad arena and a pool. Option 2 will have a twin pad arena and a pool and an auditorium. Option 3 will be twin pad arena, a third arena, the triple pad arena plus a pool. Option 4 will have a triple pad arena, a pool, and an auditorium. Option 5 will have a twin pad arena and an auditorium, and option 6 will have a triple pad arena. So in the next few slides, my colleague Robert will walk you through the programs, the various programs, and what is included under each program. Say what does it mean by a pool component? What is included under auditorium, and what comprises the arenas, twin pad, as well as the triple pad arenas. So I'll hand over the data to Robert for a moment. Thank you.
This is still not working? No? Thank you very much. And before I start, I read recently that Russell was one of the 10 top communities in Canada to live. And Ottawa was 10th, and Russell was somewhere between 1 and 10, so congratulations. This project will make you even higher. So, is that the right direction?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so we're, in the arena, we're talking about 1, 2, or 3 pads. And I will describe first what we've allowed for in the program so that you get a sense of how complete our analysis was. So the first thing is all of the arenas are NHL, full size, 85 feet by 200 feet. They all have 6 change rooms, which are 550 square feet, which is large. They are designed for adult leagues or children's leagues with parents in the change rooms. Generally, we design them as squares so that the coach can stand in the center of the room and talk to all of the players. There are two large referee change rooms. We have two multi-purpose change rooms in each arena, and they're slightly smaller than the regular change rooms. We have room for a pro shop and skate sharpening. We have office space for the township for operations of the arenas. We have a canteen on the ground floor. We have on the second floor overlooking the two arenas, so over top of what would be the change rooms, which are generally back to back, we have room for a banquet hall or a multi-purpose room and support space. Sometimes this space is available to rent out, say, to a service club for hosting banquets, so there's income generating opportunities here. We have a 3-lane walking track around the main arena on the second floor. Our evolution of arenas over time has determined that walking tracks are incredibly popular with the senior citizens, and they add activity and life skills to the arenas during the day. There is one large arena which would be... Is this working?
There we go.
One large arena that would seat 1,500, 750 on each side. And facility storage under the bleacher seating on the away side, so you have lots of opportunities to store surplus gear for the arena or any other activities that may occur in the rental space or the arena space. The second and third arenas would have seating for 200, which is very popular for parents watching their children play. And a shared lobby space between the two arenas. And the lobby space is designed so that if you're holding tournaments, you can have large crowds of kids registering for the tournaments and also dealing with the spectators. Conventional refrigeration system for two or three of the ice surfaces. And there would be redundancy in the Zambonis as well. And then general storage for the facility. In a community pool, we've allowed for a 6-lane lap pool. That would be, in our scheme, a 25-meter pool. We have allowed for a leisure pool for children's activities. We have 2 change rooms plus a family change room. We've allowed for a dry sauna. We've allowed for office space for the lifeguards and support space for the swimming pool. And we've allowed again for general office and support space for the pool in itself. We've also allowed for multi-purpose community space and space in the lobby for viewing of the pools. The multi-purpose space we've determined is useful for parents who bring other children who aren't in the swim program. They can have other programs occurring at the same time to keep everybody entertained and occupied. And then we have general storage for the pool. Of course, pump room and associated operational space. And again, a shared lobby space. In the theater and the auditorium, we're allowing for 250 to 300 seats in the auditorium. It would be rake seating with good sight lines to the stage. We have a raised stage with a catwalk above the stage, backstage for the construction of sets and for the actors, and wings on either side for entering the stage for drama productions. We have a green room for the actors, 2 dressing rooms, 1 male, 1 female, a wardrobe and prop storage area, and of course a box office, a theater office, and a workshop for the construction of sets, and again a shared lobby space. We have 2 concepts. The 2 are, all of the options in both schemes are identical, but the 2 options, the concept 1 and the concept 2, is really the presentation of the facility on the site. You have a gorgeous 70-acre site, just, I guess that's kind of southwest. In concept 1, we're orientating the theater and the pool towards the main highway, with parking to the, as you can look in the drawing, to the left of the traffic circle, major parking. There's a drop-off in front of the complex. Pointer here if it works. So the main entrance to the complex would be kind of where I'm circling. So all of the parking is orientated to the main entrance. The orientation of the parking is perpendicular to the building, so when the kids are getting out of the trucks and the cars with their gear, they're walking through the drive aisles directly to the entrance, so they're not trying to go between the cars with their equipment, which causes damage. There would be additional parking for the site down to the left of the dome, and then we're showing some tennis courts and squash courts and or soccer fields on the site as well, and a play area. Concept 2 is rotating the building so that the entrance is facing the parking lot, which we've moved to the west. It puts the arenas closer to the dome, and the parking split to the west and to the south. So it's really a matter of preference as to kind of the architecture that you want to see as you approach the facility. In either scheme, they work well, and there are probably issues in the development of the site that we'd work on, and these would evolve over time. But it gives you an idea of the two schemes. Concept 1, option 1 is a single pool to the north of the site, and we have the two mat arenas, the shared lobby in the center, and again the entrances from the parking lot. You can see the soccer fields here, the baseball diamonds, and the courts. Separate parking for the soccer fields, getting closer to the fields. And then option 2 in concept 1 is adding the pool in the upper corner. These are, the scheme will be designed from the outset to allow easy expansion and kind of a plug and play to the main lobby in the concourse. Concourse, the main lobby is common to all of the facility, the pool, the theater, and the twin pads. So all activities would be viewed from that concourse. If any of you have been to Nepean City Hall, we designed Nepean City Hall with the council chamber, the office building, the library, and the theater all off a central concourse. It adds a great deal of activity to the space. It's a popular space for weddings. It makes for a beautiful, active facility, home for the community. Option 3 in concept 1 is adding the third rink, but the pool isn't included in that. And the concourse would be linking all three arenas together. We had talked about storage. Storage would be generally under the bleachers on this side, and you have your back-to-back change rooms here, and there would be another bank of change rooms for the third pad on the far side of the arena. Option 1, or concept 1, option 4, this just happens to be an enlargement. You can see more clearly the theater, the swimming pool, the leisure pool, the lap pool, and the 3 arenas with the common Zamboni and back of house equipment down here. What's kind of nice about the concept of having a pool paired with arenas is the waste energy from the pools, from the arena, can be used to heat the pool. So you're not throwing it away. We can use it for heating the bleacher seating. We can use it for heating hot water for the facility. We can use it for snow melt of the sidewalk in front of the building. And still we have surplus energy that we can use for heating the pool to lower your operating costs. Option 1, concept 1, option 5 would be the twin pad with the theater only, and the future pool to the upper left-hand side. And then option 1, concept 1, option 6 would be the theater again, and the two, I can't read the text there, but the 2 twin pads.
So just to confirm, essentially, like you mentioned, it's plug and play. It doesn't really matter what combination you put a standalone arena, pool, whatever the combination is. It's designed to be able to either be done in phases or to be done altogether?
Yeah, from the, if council wished to have all three components ultimately, from the very outset, we would design, or the architect would design the building so that any one of the components could be added at any time with the least interruption into the ongoing facility. So the idea of having the concourse is really key in that, because it means that the concourse would be in place, and the theater or the pool could be built to the outside of it. Eventually, a wall taken down and open up the facility. Yeah. Option one, concept 6, would be the 3 arenas, the theater again, and the pool would be optional in this case. So you build your 3 arenas from the get-go with a common concourse that those 2 would plug into down the road. And an enlargement of that. So you can see the concourse going through. And again, I would emphasize that that would be sized, that if you're holding tournaments, you can accommodate, this huge number influx of kids trying to get in and register at the, the onset of the concourse. The other thing I didn't point out, when we design arenas, there's usually a rear entrance, so the opposing team would come in from the back. You would separate the home team from the opposing team so you don't get your fight starting prior to the game. Of course, they can leave very quicker that way too. Concept 2, option 1 is, the different orientation. So the pool and the theater would be facing to the west, and you would have your 2 arenas on the east side of the building. In this particular case, we have the recreation pool and room for the theater in the future. And option 2 is to add the pool. And in this scheme, I could have talked about in the other 2, we have a, kind of an outdoor recreation play area, which is good, again, for the children. That could be fenced. Could be part of another program that you might have in the facility. Like, we haven't really talked about other opportunities, but a daycare could be a good thing here, and you could have activity through the building, 24/7 almost. Option 2, or option 3, concept 2, is adding the third pad, which gets closer to the dome. And this is kind of nice because it allows some interaction between the 2 and not a great distance to have to travel across the site. And they can have shared parking. And the other thing which I never thought about is, or I did think about shortly, is that the waste energy from the arena could also be used to replace the energy source in the dome. So I don't know what you're doing there, but there's a huge opportunity in having 3 pads and the plant for that to capitalize on the energy. And an enlargement of the pool, the theater, and the 3 pads, and you can see the play area and the proximity to the entrance to the dome. Option 2, concept 2, option 5 is the theater, and the two pads with the pool complex to be built to the top. In all these schemes with the pool adjacent to the highway, pools tend to have a lot of glass, and it's a great opportunity for people to observe, the activity going on in the complex. So it's as well as the theater with its lobby and the activity the theater generates is nice for facing the street as well.
Councilor Adam, question?
Actually, it's more of a question to Mr. Zuckerberg committee. For people at home, is it at all possible to see the actual presentation, because it still doesn't impact the presentation itself wasn't impacted, right? Is that
These blinds were in the package?
Yeah.
Yes.
This is in the package itself.
No, but the PowerPoint that they're going through right now.
It's in Schedule A, I'm looking at it right now. This is just a summary.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So, but it's not possible to to point anything at the screens then, right? Just that
They-
speaker? Thank you.
Okay, concept two option. We have the twin pad, the theater, and the future pool complex in the upper left-hand corner. Concept two, option 6, is the 3-pad with the pool and the theater not constructed. So they would be to the west side of the building. Nice thing about that is the opportunity to stage the construction to the north of the site and still allow a main entrance into the complex in the center. And enlargement for that as well. And then we have the cost estimates. Before we go on though, do you want to ask questions now or after?
Looking at the two concept, personally, I do prefer the concept number 1, being that it give a bit more space, it doesn't touch the other parking, and it's a bit more open. One other thing I wanted to suggest, and it's for the planning, but at the end of the parking that we have right now of the dome, if we can plan a street that goes to the land that is not developed, that is south of the dome. I know that they do this for home development, and that would give an opportunity that if the other place become developed with industrial, it's a good connection that could be used, whether it's for future school or anything, having the street ready at the end of the actual parking, I think should be considered.
Councilor Associate?
Yeah, I just had a quick question about the walking track.
Yes.
Like, I'm just wondering, why are we repeating another walking track when we have one at the dome? Like, would that not be kind of redundant?
Well,
Or
it's
can we
entirely
scale
up,
it down?
it's entirely up to you.
Right.
We've added it because it's become very popular in communities, so it's just included in the budget. The whole program would be refined as you move forward, whether you would need the walking track or not.
Yeah, and then like a song, I'm just wondering, can the plan be scaled down a little bit?
Oh, I think administration can correct me if I'm wrong, but this is very high level at this point in time. I mean, all these concepts can be adjusted. We see some significant numbers here. Obviously, we might want to scale some stuff back to maximize our dollars. But I think everything at this point in time is wide open as far as what will the final design be. This is just high level, just to give the council an idea of which ballpark we're playing in.
One thing for the concept, whenever you're talking about the hall on the second floor, how big are the room considered?
Ooh, it's big, because you're looking at spanning the 2 change rooms plus a concourse, so it's easily as wide as this council chamber. So it's it's a couple thousand square feet by the it's a square, but it's what's this 60 feet across by the length of the arena, 60 feet by 200 feet. So it's huge.
So it's been done before that those big, like the long hall, can be split,
Yes.
and having some smaller room that can be used at the same time, or having the big hall at one time.
Yeah.
But with the sketch that you have now, do you know how much seating people that you're talking about? Is it like 200,
Well,
600?
It could be 200. It would depend on how you wanted to divide up the space. So I was here, about a year ago, making a presentation, and we did 2 twin pads in Fredericton, New Brunswick, with the space between the 2 twin pads very similar to this. Each twin pad was slightly different. So one had one large hall with a large kitchen and storage so that I think it was the Lions Club could operate it. The other one had several smaller meeting rooms with operable walls that could be opened up, so there was more opportunity for smaller groups to meet or larger groups. And there was like warming kitchens with that. So, I mean, generally it would be up to the development of the program and what you think is important for your building for operational needs of how we would use that space.
So again, as we get further along into details, this is
Yeah.
something we can
I was
specify.
just wondering how long it was considering the space.
Have you been to the Velsensplex? So on the second floor there's a restaurant, and I forget what it's called now, but there's a restaurant, and then there's also viewing from up there. So they use that as a source of generating income in that building, overlooking two of the rinks.
Let's see this one.
Also, I was just, because I'm not big aware for the hockey, I know here they're mentioning about the NHL size for the three of them. Is it something that should be considered for the three of them, or if there, I know I've seen some other literature that was saying that there's different size.
I think that would be up to council at that point in time when we get to that idea. Again, this is very high level at this point, just to give us an idea of the capital costs.
But I'm just asking, since we're in the drawing, it might change.
Councilor Leonard?
Well, I think there's many options. I mean, our two arenas right now aren't that size. They're both different sizes to begin with, which causes, concerns with when you're dealing with, your bigger athletes or whatnot. I know whether or not the rink can sustain body checking or not. I know the Russell rink for years didn't have any body checking going on in that rink. And the glass or the boards weren't designed really to absorb that. So there's a lot of things that go into the discussion. The seating capacity, we see 1,500. I don't know what the CIH Academy seating is. It's significant. I think it's about 1,500 or 2,000.
I think it's actually higher.
And whether or not it's actually getting the usage it needs. It's, bringing in a junior hockey program here. I know we have a junior B program today. Does that bump up to a junior A program at some point in time? What would be called the CCHL or whatever that program is? Obviously, an arena like that would be attractive to somebody to come into this area. For that, training camps for other programs, obviously having that type of facility would be significant. Tournaments, like you said, is huge. Having the additional rinks, I'll give my 2 cents. I don't think this has been done with an eye on the needs of the community. I think it's more done on what's potentially available out there. So I think there's still a whole big needs analysis done. But being involved in minor hockey and all the other sports that use the facilities, that there's, to me, there's obvious need for a three-rink facility or 3 rinks within the municipality. So we need to make sure that we have, if we're doing something, that's, to me, is what we need to be focusing on, is the incremental ice being available in the community. And again, to me, it's putting them all together, and if that means repurposing other facilities, then so be it. But I think, to me, we need 3 rinks to be able to accommodate the fact that we've grown and that we plan on growing. And if we look at the growth rates of our community over the last couple of years and what it will be for the next 6 years, with all the new housing going in, that, these facilities are gonna pick up very quickly. I know enrollment is increasing as we speak in all the minor sports that go into the arena facilities. I was speaking to one of the minor hockey presidents this afternoon, mentioning how, we're increasing teams already at the novice Adam Pee Wee levels, which means that those are just gonna continue to go up throughout the years. and as we bring in more people. So obviously a needs component needs to be examined to ensure that, but to me, I like options 3, 4, or 6 to start with, because they have the 3 now, so.
Yeah, if I could just comment on that. So we did Smith Falls Arena, so it's a home to the Bears. So the change rooms were designed for the Bears. And in Fredericton, the Grant Harvey was designed for St. Thomas University for their varsity teams. So the men's and women's with the fitness center. So we accommodated that. The Willie O'Ray rink in Fredericton was set up with 2 change rooms for the adjacent Leo Hay High School for their teams. So all of that was thought out in the beginning, and they addressed it. Both of those arenas, and it's not part of this program here, but they had 1 rink in both arenas that was Olympic size. And they had, I guess, a strong figure skating community that needed a wider ice surface to skate on, and also their speed skaters. So that 1 rink was not dedicated, but it was designed so that they could use it. But it was also good because when it was subdivided, you could have the smaller teams play on them. You could have 3 playing across the arena with a bit more width for the length of for the ice surface. So, all good ideas.
Conseiller Tarnasky?
Just a quick procedural question. I know that DC charges can only be applied to new facilities. So if we're looking at changing sizes or upsizing existing ice or adding ice through upsizing, is there a portion of DC charges that can go towards that?
Thank you, Councilor Tarnasky. Mr. Leduc, Mr. Godin, I believe there is a portion for the increased level of service that could be used, but if you could just confirm.
Through Ms. Mayor, Councilor Tarnasky. So basically, we could attribute a certain percentage of our project to be financed through DCs. At the end of the day, we just need to have justification as to why that portion of the expense is attributed to growth, why the growth in the municipality triggered that need to expand. So there's always ways to formulate.
But again, so essentially a portion, most likely for the arenas it would be a lower portion, unless we're talking about a third rink completely, that would be DC charges, versus a pool in our auditorium, which we really don't have now year round. A larger portion, like the dome, if I remember well, the dome was financed about 80%, 81% by development charges.
Yeah, the dome was financed 81% from development charges. Basically, the logic behind that was the addition of a new soccer field where we have lots of soccer fields in the township. The addition of it was a portion of it was for new growth. And yeah, obviously, essentially it depends on the scenarios that are chosen, what the formula is going to be. If we do add a third ice pad, then it's easily justifiable that portion of the project is growth. And for a swimming pool, a portion of the pool would service obviously existing owners as well, but there could definitely be a number put to that to identify a certain ratio.
Follow up?
Can we just clarify for everyone that's in attendance, just the difference between DC charges funding from DC charges versus taxation?
Monsieur Godin?
Yes, I can, and I'll go into more detail when I present the financial plan, but essentially DC charges is from developers when they apply for a building permit, whereas the rest, not maybe the whole rest, but the taxation is basically that yearly tax bill that every owner receives.
Conseiller Godin?
At what point, this is a question over here, sorry. At what point does the growth factor start? Because we've had 2 arenas for so many years. I know for a fact every association is using other facilities, meaning we don't have the capacity because of growth. But then we gotta consider the fact of, well, what's servicing our residents now versus what can be serviced in the future from a development charge perspective. Like, when does that clock start ticking for us to say, well, it's growth for this amount versus this amount, because we're already at a certain level that we need to account for a certain level of growth. So I wanna make sure that we're not forgetting about the fact that we haven't built anything for so many years, that we've used those facilities, and now everyone's using other facilities to make up for it. So does that factor into that growth factor? So it's not, you know, I'll just throw a number, it's not 60% for Arena 3, it's actually 90% for Arena 3, because that additional 30%, we need to make up because we've never had it. You know what you understand what I mean by that?
Monsieur Godin?
Merci, Monsieur Councilor Rowan. So yeah, I understand what you're saying, and it is a very complicated process, and it's difficult to put a precise ratio, right? Essentially, the way it's handled is every time we renew the DC, so every time we do a DC study, which we're obligated to do every 5 years, with the consultants and with the directors and consultations that we have, we try to kind of have those discussions and to see exactly what's been done in the past, what's been the level of service in the past, and what's the upcoming growth, how do we maintain our level of service with the new residents. It's a complicated calculation that goes into it, and a lot of factors do right into it. There's never going to be a perfect number. Obviously, there's too many factors and circumstances that change. But we do redo that study every 5 years and touch base on all those factors.
Now, just to confirm for the people at home and people in the audience, we are due to redo our DC charges next year. Currently, Bill 108 is significantly changes the way we calculate development charges. It's putting community benefit plans in place. But those details haven't been finalized by the province yet, is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. So basically, our current DC bylaw expires in 2021. So we were going to update it in 2021. With Bill 108, as of January 1st, 2021, we can no longer collect DCs for soft services. Soft services include recreational services and libraries and things like that. So that rec complex, as of January 1st, 2021, we won't be able to collect DCs towards that portion. That collection tool is replaced by community benefit charge, like you said, and regulations on those are in the draft stage right now. So we don't know exactly how it's going to be affected. All we know is the calculation is going to be a bit different, but we will still have access to funds through development. But for sure, we're going to have a lot more details for council in the upcoming months in regards to that.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw something up because, you know, people may ask, well, why six change rooms rather than 4, which normally if you have a rink, you do 4 change rooms. And I think that's going to help accommodate as well some of the new regulations out there that Hockey Canada's mandated, especially at the earlier levels. Your IPs and your novices going half ice. So now instead of having 2 teams out on the ice, now you're going to have 4 teams out on the ice. So you're going to need to accommodate more rooms, and you don't want kids sharing the rooms and whatnot. So I think I like the concept of the 6 rooms, and I like the concept of the 2 additional change rooms. As we all know, when you've got girls that play on boys teams or whatever, you need those extra change rooms. You know, I don't know about having 2 referee rooms, but I'm just making a joke of being referee in the rooms. So. But you know, I think it's the fact is you got girl referees and boy referees, right? So you need to make sure you have change rooms for them as well. So I think it's I think that concept all works for me.
Questions, Poincy? No? Can we continue the presentations?
I'm finished, so we can talk numbers now.
Yes. An important factor in this discussion.
Thank you, Ruben. So in the next few slides, I'll be walking you through the cost estimates. There are 2 components to it. One is the capital cost estimate and the operating cost estimate. So if you put these costs on a timeline, all facilities have these 2 components. So the capital cost estimates will come into play in the first 4 years. So that is planning and development. Most probably the first 2 years will be the planning time, and then you will have the construction period. So that will be the 4-year time period. And then afterwards it will all be the operating cost component. So first we'll look at the capital cost estimate comparison for the 6 options. It is pretty straightforward. The more components you have, higher the cost. But one thing to look at here is the combination of these components and how the cost varies. The most expensive component in these options is the pool, and followed by the auditorium, and the arena seems to be on a per square foot basis the most least expensive. So option 1 is around 38 million. It has 2 components, the arena and the pool. First 4 options all have the pool in it. And second option has 3 components. That is arena, twin pad arena, the pool, and the auditorium, and it is 44.5 million. Third option has the triple pad arena and the pool, and it is 46.3 million.
So just to confirm, so essentially, I mean, there's options that are not listed there if we did solely a twin pad without anything else. If you do, so essentially a twin pad, from what I've seen, a twin pad is $28 million. A pool is roughly just under $10 million, and an auditorium is $6 million. And then if you create a third ice pad for then that's an additional, I believe it was $8 million on top of the 28, so 36 for 3 rings. Is that correct?
That is, yeah. So, as I said, it's pretty straightforward. So what we can learn from here is that how we combine these components, we can have certain efficiencies. So if you look at the first 4 combinations here, you can see that the per square foot rate kind of drops when we have more components added. So that shows some level of economies of scale that we can achieve when we build all of these together. So if you are phasing these projects, there is certainly an advantage. I mean, you don't have to spend all the money up front, but if you're spending it in the future, that will be a much higher cost, both due to inflation as well as having to get all the resources required to procure and then deliver the project. So this is a side-by-side comparison of the options. So again, it's pretty straightforward. You can see the breakdown of the cost across the various components. You can see that the twin pad arena is about 28 million. This swimming pool is close to 10 million, and the auditorium is about 6 million. This is a comparison between option 4, 5, and 6. Again, you can see the breakdown of the cost components. Option 4 is the option with all components included, which is the twin pad, the triple pad, swimming pool, and the auditorium. And it costs the highest, which is 52.7 million. Moving forward, the second component of second cost component, which is the operating cost assumptions. So we can see the cost comparison between the options. Operating costs generally includes what I call ADJOURNMENT, which is insurance, taxes, management expenses, insurance, taxes, repair and maintenance, and utilities and management expenses. So in here, we don't have taxes or revenue. It's a municipal facility, but we have all the components, starting with insurance. Then management costs is all that day-to-day management expenses you might have, plus the salaries and benefits of people, personnel who are associated with the maintenance and operation of the facility. So it's not just personnel solely associated with this proposed facility, but also those shared from the rest of the recreational parks and recreational infrastructure that the township has. So you can see the comparison again. It is a function of what component we have added into what component is included in each option. Obviously, option 4 has the highest number of components, and it has the highest annual operating expense of 1.22 million. So one of the factor I wanted
Sorry,
to
question, Conseil Lemon?
When we talk operational cost assumptions, are they those net of revenues, or do they not take revenues into account?
that was good. Yeah, it's not. It's just the costs.
Costs.
Yeah. So I was going to speak about the revenue component. So revenue generally for these kind of recreational facilities, what we have observed is that through their fee for programs, they're able to generate roughly half the operating expenses. And what we have seen is, depending again on the program, it generally ranges from 450,000 to 600,000 a year.
As a revenue.
Revenue.
Just to confirm, in your operating expenses, Monsieur Leduc, Monsieur Godin, we haven't calculated any asset replacement in those figures. Is that correct?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I believe that's correct. So that would come on top of that.
The asset replacement would be on top of these.
Yeah. And again, we will touch on that when we do represent the financial plan.
Conseil Brisson?
But then whenever you were saying 50% of the operational costs would be the revenue, but like whenever you arrive with comparison with pools and arena, it's not the same. So we don't have in this presentation how it would cost and what the net loss would be for the pool, and what's the net loss for comparison with the arenas, because I'm sure that the pool would be not as if won't generate as much revenue than the arena. You just took all the complex, so but to analyze
That might be, in regards to our administration, might be able to give us at one point a better revenue costing source as to how the breakdown of the different options would be. Monsieur Godin?
Merci, M. Maire. Donc, pour répondre à ta question, Conseil Brisson, en ce moment ici, pour le plan financier, c'est un plan financier qui est quand même préliminaire, puis vraiment basé sur l'information que l'on a rapport. So just for the time being, the cost estimates and the revenue estimates that we've made are strictly based on the report, so the 50% plus all of it. So I think it's based on 55% actually. And once we move further in the process and we have more specific things to look at, there for sure will be some more detailed analyses on the varying costs.
Right, because we talked about a scale of efficiencies where, depending how the combination is, you might have some savings there, whereas if you just do a standalone building, you might not have those savings. So, so that I'm sure that I'll be asking, I'm sure council will be asking for that for a closer cost analysis, revenues and operational costs.
To your point, Councilor Brisson, pool certainly is more expensive to operate in comparison to the arena. And also revenue-wise, yes, pool does not generate as much revenue as the arena, because how it's operated across the year and how the contracts are made. Yes, and also the revenue component, it needs to be studied in detail. It also will need to be looked at in relation to the needs of the community, as Councilor Lauren pointed out. So it's a much more deeper analysis that we need to do.
I think one component as well is we're talking about revenues. The revenues have to be looked at what are the current rates we're charging for our ice time, and what would be the current rates if we moved ahead with a project of this size. Because obviously, if, I'd be surprised if we built a $30 million complex and we charge the same rate for our ice time. I don't think that would be reasonable. But that'll be something I'll have to come in that analysis.
Yes. questions? So I think I've come to the end of our presentation here. That's it.
I have a thank you very much. As-tu d'autres questions, membre du conseil? Non? Il va y avoir une période de questions à la fin de la réunion. Monsieur Leduc?
Monsieur le maire, dès que présenté le rapport, maintenant on passe à l'élément financier de la présentation. Puisque le département des finances a monté, encore une fois, on est dans un parapluie très large, souvent ici, donc on n'a pas les détails peut-être à vos questions complètement. Mais so at this stage we're about to ask the finance department just to show what are the financing options or costs in relation to these different projects. So we'll ask our treasurer to proceed with the presentation.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Leduc. Monsieur Godin, the show is yours.
Merci, Monsieur le maire. Bonsoir, chers membres du conseil. So as I said earlier, so this is a preliminary financial plan. Basically, the goal here is really to take all the information from the report, from quarter's report, all the numbers, and to translate it into the language you're used to. What's the impact on the budget? What's the impact on taxation dollars, on debt capacity, and all those things that we go through every year at budget sessions. So to start, I just wanted to circle back to the 2019 budget presentation where we initially presented recreation complex funding strategy. So basically the idea was to move forward with annual taxation increase of $150,000 to be able to build up a reserve that's eventually going to be used towards the construction of a rec complex. This table here is the table that was presented with the budget presentation. So I'm just going to go through it quickly just to remind the council and the public's knowledge as well. So essentially, the first row at the top, just beneath the years, we're showing that in 2019 we've contributed $150,000 to that reserve. We're increasing the contribution by $150,000 every year. We brought the focus here on 2023 because that was the date of construction that was included in the DC study. So what this is showing for the strategy in 2023 is that we're basically going to be doing a contribution in 2023 of $750,000 to bring the reserve up to $1.5 million, and that if we stop doing tax increases at that point in time, we have $750,000 available to apply towards a debt payment.
Yearly.
A yearly debt payment, exactly, for 20 years. And basically the calculation on $750,000 would bring us, would make us able to contribute to a debt payment for a loan of $10.7 million without increasing our taxation.
Merci, Brisson.
Juste pour clarifier, ça fait que si on prend l'exemple que c'est en 23 qu'on bâtirait, mais la façon que c'est marqué comme c'est là, en disant que c'est une augmentation, parce que 1% c'est environ 100 000 $, que là à 150 000 c'est 1,5. Donc sur 4 ans, ça voudrait dire que de ton coût d'opération, qu'à chaque année on augmente à peu près de 1 à 2%, mais on serait rendu à 6% de plus
comparé à aujourd'hui.
À comparer à aujourd'hui. Ça fait que ça serait une hausse qu'on aurait eu à chaque année de près de 1,5% pour juste l'opérationnel régulier, mais il y aurait un 6% de plus juste pour le complexe comme c'est là, de son avec ce schéma-là.
C'est ça, donc, sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor. Donc, c'est ça, essentiellement, ce que cette stratégie montre, puis on le montre plus tard dans les diapos aussi, mais c'est qu'on augmenterait les taxes de 150 000. C'est pas tout à fait 1,5%, c'est environ 1,2, 1,5, 1,3. En moyenne, sur les 5 ou 6 ans, ça serait environ 1,05. Donc, ça représente sur une facture de taxe environ $20 par année d'augmentation envers cette stratégie ici. Ben, c'est aussi parce que c'est aussi parce que l'évaluation augmente d'année en année aussi. Donc, un 150 000 en 2019, peut-être que c'était 1,3%, mais en 2020, ça va être un petit peu moins. En 2023, ça va être encore moins.
Okay. D'autres questions? Councilor Kronowski?
Juste pour confirmer, M. Godet, alors, le plan ici pour 2023, de la façon qu'on regarde ça, c'est vraiment pour, au niveau capital, au niveau d'argent qui est disponible, en fait, de construction, pas d'opération. C'est ça?
Oui, Catherine, M. Mayor, donc conseiller financier, c'est exactement ça. Donc, c'est vraiment pour, si tu veux, comme un genre de down payment. Combien de liquidité qu'on a en 2023 pour pouvoir procéder au projet. Puis, on ne s'y met pas à 23, on ne le voit pas bien sur l'écran, mais c'est surligné en 2023, mais on montre aussi que, par exemple, si on attendait en 2027, on aurait, la contribution serait 1,35 million, notre réserve serait 6 millions, puis l'emprunt pourrait être de 19 millions. Donc, ça démontre un petit peu aussi la question de timing. Si on attend plus longtemps, ben, c'est sûr qu'on est capable d'accumuler un petit peu plus de fonds, mais comme le consultant a dit aussi, le coût de vie avec le taux d'indexation, le coût de construction va aussi augmenter.
Essentiellement, en 2023, on a un 750 000 de disponible pour faire comme un paiement sur un emprunt. Puis on a 1,5 million pour un down payment. Si je compare à ça avec une maison, j'ai 750 000 pièces par année que je peux faire comme mon mortgage payment, j'ai 1,5 million pour un down. C'est ça?
Oui, M. Maire, c'est exactement ça. Ça, c'est si on isole vraiment juste à cette stratégie ici. Donc, c'est sûr que si on veut aller de l'avant avec un projet de plus que 10 millions ou plus que 22 millions, mais il va y avoir d'autres façons de pouvoir collecter ces fonds.
Conseiller là.
But nothing stops us from continuing the fund past 2023 to get to, I think we got, what is it, 2028 there, I can't see.
Yeah.
Whereas you would have a $1.5 million annual payment at that point in time. You won't have the buildup of the cumulative, because you'll have spent the cumulative at the year 2023. But now you've got every year, so year one you've got a 750, year two you've got a 900. So every year you're going up with that payment, and then to the max, it's up to 2028 where you got 1.5 million now per year. So that it doesn't limit us at a $750,000 payment, where the 750 might be for 10 million. Well, once we got to the 1.5, now that could be the $20 million payment, or whatever that number is.
Essentially, that's based on the fact that we would be increasing taxation 1% every year, roughly, specifically for this fund.
Correct.
That's correct. So through Mr. Mayor, Councilor Lawrence. So you're right. So there's nothing that forces us to stop doing those yearly increases in the year of construction. We could obviously continue to do those increases. When we're going to be looking at payment, the loan terms, I mean, most of the recent loans that we've done were for larger loans have been done on 20 years, and it's been a fixed term. Nothing stops us from having shorter terms, like on doing renewable 5-year terms, and depending on the cash flow that we do have available, working on that. That's definitely something that's going to be looked at more in detail when we do get to that point in the process. But this was really strictly to show council how we could get some funds up to actually be able to finance the construction.
Monsieur Leduc?
Mr. Mayor, Council, just to remind the public, this was for a $22 million project.
Right. What's shown here?
What's shown here that was initially discussed in budget discussions back early in the year. So now we have tonight a presentation from a consultant regarding the actual costs, and we know that we're far away from 22 million, but that was used for that expenditure expectation back then.
Originally at the beginning of our DC study, which was done 5 years ago. Conseiller Larry?
So in theory, if that fund were to be 300,000 per year, then you would get to your 2023 number at 1.5 million, and then you're moving that much quicker as an advance to that, and you could stop those payments at that point in time rather than drag it out and increase it that way too, right?
So you go there?
Through Mr. Mayor. So that's correct, Councilor Lawrence. So basically what we wanted to do is bring those numbers into context with what we've already presented. What you will see later on is that if we do follow this specific strategy and we do build in 2023, 2024, we will be required to make well, depending on the scenario or the options chosen, there could be a significant loan made, and there could be a significant tax increase at the date of construction. Council could choose to increase this contribution so as to kind of smooth out the tax increases over time instead of hitting with a major tax increase at the date of construction. So
Well, my personal opinion would be a smoothing concept would be a lot easier to absorb than a lump sum. That's just my opinion. I think it's, important. Now, the one thing that I wanna understand, we keep talking about 2023, and 2023 is the concept date of shovel in the ground, or is 2023 the concept date of utilizing, opening the facility? Because I don't know what the timeline is for construction. Maybe that is something that could be shared, because I wanna understand what that timing is from shovel in the ground to utilization of the facility.
I think at this point in time, shovel in the ground is really up to council's decision as to when do we wanna build this thing and, at what cost. Staff are presenting these numbers and they're going based on the discussion we had at the budget of 2023. Mr. Godin?
Merci, Mr. Mayor. So to answer your question, this analysis is kind of simplified in the sense that since we don't have yet a concept or design, and now we're starting to have more information and a better idea of the timing. We heard about maybe 2 years for design and 2 years for construction. The concept here and the calculations are based on us doing a loan in 2023. Essentially, if we follow our current practices, we usually do our loan at the end of the project when we know the final cost. Which, if we would start the process, this is taking into consideration that the loan is in 2023, so that would be when the project is complete.
That's an important point that you just made, right? Is that is for a loan payment in 2023. Now, obviously, if it takes 2 years to design, we're at the end of 2019 now, you're talking 2022 anyway, and that's the question I'm asking, is it 2 years to build, is it a year and a half, is it 1 year to build? I don't know the answer to that. So whatever that is, I wanna make sure we're setting realistic potential timelines for residents. Like, we can't do it any quicker than this timeline, but then it's council to decide, well, are we gonna follow that timeline, or are we gonna delay it a year and delay it another year? But I'd like to get an idea of what the planning timeline is. I heard 2 years earlier, and what the construction timeline would be. So that at least we can set out, when we know right now, based on if it's 2 years, we know 2023 isn't gonna be the loan year, which means no one's using the facility in 2023. So that's what I'm trying to make sure that we can relay out to the public as we're doing this process.
Councilor Kanafi?
So just a couple of points, Mr. Godet. When you look at 2023 or any of the amounts, so even 2019, so we're assuming end of fiscal year, right? So this is accumulated at end of fiscal year, not at the beginning of fiscal year. So that's already a 12-month difference. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Secondly, in terms of the projects that were presented and so on, so we're just, at this stage, we're still very kind of open to ideas where we say, okay, well, those were the options that were presented, but we could, based on what was told tonight, so we can kind of, pick and choose and really do this in stages. So 22 million available in 2023 could certainly cover off a coal and whatever else. So we could be in good shape even starting earlier if we kind of really, break it down into smaller pieces. Is that accurate?
Mr. Leduc, Mr. Godin?
That's accurate. The only thing I would bring your attention to is the 22 million. That's not actually how much we have available for financing in 2023. It would actually be the 16.5 million. But there's a lot of flexibility. The council will have the final decision on when we do what, and Councilor Lowen as well, like there will have to be a lot deeper analyses done as we move forward and as we have a better idea of exactly what our options are and regarding timing as well. Merci, Monsieur Maire. So this slide was really just to bring us back to the budget of what was presented at that time. The following slides, we've kind of taken the presentation from quarters and the numbers in there and kind of show you different impacts on the tax rates and on our borrowing capacity for the different options that were presented. So this first slide has a lot of information. It's basically, this is just an example. I wanted to start off with taking one of the scenarios. So we've chosen option 4 in this case, which I believe is the most expensive. And I'm just going to go through this slide just to explain to council what the methodology is behind all the numbers that we're going to be showing you in the next table, the following tables. So if we break this table in two, so the bottom portion underneath the green line is the financing. So that's basically different sources of funding that we could use towards the construction of the rec complex. Above the green line is a bit of a summary of important details. So I'll start with the financing portion, and then I'll be better able to explain the top portion. So basically, the different sources of funding that we've been looking for the rec complex. At line K, so the first one is really the recreation complex reserve fund contribution. So basically, depending on when we do the construction, like we saw earlier, we had 1.5 million saved up in 2023. So that's that first funding here. The following two lines are the surcharges that were approved by council regarding ice rental as well as pool rental or pool fees. So we see we have an additional $480,000 here and 35 coming from the pool fees. So essentially, I would expect here that depending on the option taken and the assumptions we've made in the analysis is for the options with no pools, we didn't take into consideration funding from the pool surcharge, given that it's really coming from the pool revenues. But we're really only talking about $35,000. And the next line is really the DC contributions. Maybe just a little asterisk here. By the time we do get to construction, this will be a combination of these development charges and community benefit charge, which is the new fee that we don't really have complete detail about, but that we know is comparable and is to replace the development charges for soft services. And essentially, yeah.
Sorry, you're only anticipating that to be 4.2 million of a $9 million pool indoor pool that we don't have, and an $8 million rink that we need. So out of $16 million, we're going to get 4.2 million. That doesn't make sense to me.
Mr. Godet?
I understand, sorry. So basically, the 4.2 million comes from the limitations that are imposed on us for the calculation of the DCs. I touched earlier briefly on the level of service. When we do our DC study, the consultant's going to look at all our assets, our existing assets, to calculate what's the current level of service. So it's basically a value attributed for all our facilities and all our assets for every department per household. And when we do estimate the growth, we can't. So the portion of a project that we attribute to growth can't increase our level of service. So there's basically a cap that's calculated per department when we do our DC study. And for the recreation department, we reached that cap. So basically, we did include in our DC study the maximum that we could get from for the rec complex.
Now, just to clarify that was at the previous DC charge bylaw we have in place currently. But by building the dome, we've actually increased our level of service. Therefore, once we do the new DC study, if my understanding is correct, we should be able to increase the DC charge, and that will give us a bigger revenue on the recreational side. So our DC charges coming, or the CDC charge, will actually increase at that point in time. Mr. Godet?
That's correct. So, well, and that's still kind of taken into consideration here, our current cap, so if we were to construct a rec complex today, the maximum that we are entitled to go get from DCs for a rec complex is 3.6 million. But like you said, knowing that we did build a sports zone and our level of service has been increased by that, we've estimated an increase to 4.25. There's a lot of unknowns still. I mean, is that the right number? Maybe it is, maybe not. And with the community benefit charge, the regulation's not out yet, so we've made a lot of assumptions there that they're still gonna follow that same formula and that we will have an increase. But that at this point in time, with the information that we do have, the 4.25 million is kind of.
So we've got two follow-ups to that.
If I could just elaborate, just because I told Councilor Tarnowski earlier on as well that I would elaborate on development charges versus taxation. So development charges is really, and I'll just explain it for the public's benefit as well as a refresher for members of the council. When we issue building permits for constructions of houses or commercial facilities, we charge a development charge to the builder. Essentially, those are all funds that we collect from the growth community to be deposited into an account that we can use later on to be able to build the infrastructure required to offer that service to grow. So basically, it's the concept of growth pays for growth. We are a growing community, and with all that growth, we do require a lot of new infrastructure. And so the development charges is a way that we were able to collect those funds without increasing our taxes.
And just to be clear, the development charges is very regulated by the province. There's very strict rules. You cannot decide that we want to build a $50 million complex and we're going to charge the development community 95% of that over the next 10 years. Obviously, if it's a benefit to the existing population, there's only a certain percentage per the act that we can go collect.
That's correct. There's a list of limitations and requirements for a project to be eligible, and there's also limitations as to the amount that we are allowed to collect in total when we establish those rates.
Good. Two follow-ups.
follows.
Well, the first one is, when we talked about service levels, you said the recreation service levels are maxed for the arenas. What does that mean?
Through Mr. Mayor, so basically what that means is what the consultant did when we did the DC study. They looked at all our assets regarding the park, the recreation department. So all of our facilities, our arenas, our parks, attributed a value to all of those assets and divided it by our current population. That gives you a number which is the denominator in the calculation of the maximum. So basically, with that number, then the other factor that comes in is growth. How much growth do we expect to have in the next 10 years? So the total capital cost that we can add to our DC charges, or our capital project list in the DC charges, if we add the value of all those projects to the existing project, or our existing assets, and we divide it by the total population, including all the growth and all existing, we can be above that initial calculation, or that initial value per household.
Okay, well, that's a key point, because are we taking into account the services that these associations and the residents are using outside of our municipality, that they're being forced to use? And I'll use the minor hockey associations as an example, and I'll forget about the indoor pools that everyone has to go to other municipalities for, but let's just talk about the arenas, where every single association is buying ice outside of this municipality because there's not enough prime ice available to them. So if those aren't being taken into account, your denominator is wrong. So your cost per household is wrong.
Does the law allow us to take that into
That's pretty
consideration?
serious. So that's what it comes down to, is the act and the way the formula is really legislated. I understand your point, and I'm not going to defend your point of view or the legislation's point of view. I think just to explain, I think where they come from is, if we're able to service our existing population, and I agree, we're not servicing them if they're going away. But I think the way they see it in that sense is that, and I'm just speculating, and maybe that's not why they wrote the legislation that way, is that we are still able to service them as they require with what they have available outside.
Well, that's why I asked the question about when does the clock start ticking? Because if we're saying the clock starts ticking now, well, we've lost 10 years of growth to count for a rec complex in this community, which makes no sense at all. Right? I mean, and I'll come back to my last point.
I mean, to answer that question, the calculation is redone every 5 years, basically, so. I mean, in 2016, if you ask when does the clock start to make that calculation, in 2016 when the study was done, it was based on the reality in 2016, which was the facilities and the parks that we had then, and the population that we had then, and the projections of growth that were existing at that point in time. When we do the study next year or the year after, well, it's gonna have to be next year for recreations. The calculation is gonna be redone as of 2020. The facilities is gonna have increased value based on the fact that we have a new dome. The other factor in that calculation is gonna be different as well, because we've had growth since then. So basically the study, what it does is it really looks at the situation at that point in time, and looks forward and identifies the need. It's important to understand too that for the rec complex, we have been collecting funds since, I think it was first put into the DCs with our initial DC back in the early 2000s. So we have been collecting funds for development charges for the rec complex since then.
Just to clarify as well, we did use some of those development charges for the creation of the dome.
Exactly, so we did spend.
Well, that's where I'm going. We used $2.8 million plus another $800 and some odd thousand of development charges for the dome. So that's $3.6 million for the dome on a $5 million project, and you're telling me we can use $4.2 million for a $52 million project? Those numbers don't seem right to me. And the fact that we're not calculating associations in our community that aren't being serviced right now because of growth that has happened over the last 10, 15 years and are being forced to go outside the municipality. But we're saying, well, we're maxed out here and we're not taking anything else into consideration. That to me is not showing the accurate picture of our recreational needs in order to support development.
Monsieur Leduc?
So, Madam Conseil, I understand Councilor Lorraine's point. Certainly we'll take note of it, and if the Act allows us to do that, and there's any way we can add or calculate those hours somewhere outside the township, if that's allowable by the Act, certainly we'll take note and try to get more out of it if we can.
And definitely look at the pool as well, because right now, as much as there's people from hockey going outside, everybody that wants to use a pool is going to the outside.
Well,
we don't have that
yeah,
service whatsoever right now.
But I'm talking, so yeah, that's a key point. And, let's take into account the fact that anyone playing at a certain level of rep hockey or competitive skating or rep broom ball, whatever that is, that when they have to go outside the municipality, so anybody playing for the Gloucester Rangers, as an example, don't use our facilities. And they don't get an allocation to those facilities. But they are a Russell Minor Hockey Association player. And Russell Minor Hockey gets no funding, no benefit to that, to be able to give that ice to those associations. So we are not servicing the needs of them, on top of the fact, where I was going with it is, we have our associations in the municipality being forced to go outside and get it, not just individual taxpayers, but the associations that the taxpayers fund are being forced to go outside the municipality to get ice, right? I mean, the Wild don't practice in our arenas because they are playing because we don't have the ice availability. So I can't sit here and go, well, yeah, we're using the proper methodology, and I know it's not you, and I know that's not the issue. Please don't think that I'm pushing it all on you. I'm just saying that we need to make sure we're calculating it properly according to the regulations. And if the regulations need to change, then we need to start banging the door at the province to say, hey guys, you're not taking this into account properly. How does this get changed? So, you know, I'm very concerned at a $4.2 million number for development charge or whatever other name it's gonna be put onto for this project. Whether it's a $30 million project or a $50 million project, at $4.2 million on at least $16 million of growth aspect, to me makes no sense.
And again, that's based on the current DC charge bylaw, and that will change next year.
Yeah, yes, that's correct. So definitely based, when that new regulation does come out, we will study and consult to make sure we do maximize the usage of it and what we can do in that regard.
Any other questions, members of the council at this point? Mr. Bonsoir, Mr. Ledet?
Merci, M. Maire. Donc, I mentioned the 4 sources of funding. The next line, which is at 0, I still wanted to include there, just to say other, because basically they're, at this point in time, for our analyses, we didn't take into consideration any partnerships, any grants, or any the decommissioning of existing arenas, any other source of revenues that could potentially come out there, or any opportunities that could come up in future years. We really kept it down to the strategy that's already in place, potential for loans and the DC.
This is essentially the biggest project, worst case scenario.
That's essentially in a nutshell. Once I've gone through this example, I won't go through the same exercise with every option, but I do have a summary table to present with the academic and the debt and the tax rates for each option.
Because currently item H is, with this scenario, we're talking about a 20% increase in taxation in this scenario.
That's correct, and that's strictly for the payment of the debt.
Payment of the debt, that's not operational, that's not anything else, that's not asset management, that's just strict construction costs.
That's correct. So I'll just finish going through that table. So in line, in row P, so for the loan portion, that's basically the difference between the project costs and the different funding levels, or different funding sources. Just so you understand, the total project cost here is $58 million. The actual cost in the table, or in the quarters report, I think was at $52 million. We're taking into consideration indexing here, because we will be showing different options, different timing, if we do in 2023 versus 2026, what's the difference, what is waiting a few years on the different factors being evaluated. So if we now go to the top portion, basically we're showing here, this is option 4, description of the options, which was detailed earlier on. Total cost in 2023 is $58 million. So we're proposing a 2023 construction date here, or 2023 loan date.
Completion date.
The 10.7 million is essentially what we've shown in the previous slide. That's what will be available. We could do a loan of 10.7 million without increasing taxes based on the contribution we're ready to make at that point in time. And the 41 million would be the difference between the total loan of 51 million and what we're currently able to fund as an annual payment. And the 2.7 million is what a loan, an annual payment on a $40 million loan represents. So essentially, the $2.7 million is the tax increase that we're going to have to be making in that particular scenario, which represents about 20.5% tax increase. And the final 2 lines in the table is really to show the impact on our borrowing capacity. So for 2 points, on a total loan payment of $3.5 million, which is essentially 2.7 plus the $750,000 that we're applying. That would represent about 80% of our borrowing capacity, of our self-imposed borrowing capacity. So I'll make reference to our debt policy a bit later in the presentation. Any questions regarding this slide?
No. Right, Councilor Tomasky?
Sorry, just a clarification then. So if I go back to your original the funding strategy, when we look at the money put aside every year, that's in today's dollars. Is that correct?
Yeah. So this is assuming that $150,000 increase would not increase yearly. So it's really 150,000 first year, 300 the second, 300 or 450 the next year. So we're not indexing anything.
That's not indexed. Thank you.
So this slide here is just basically a recap of all the six options that you've already seen. You'll notice we've broken down options 4 and 5 into A and B. We've chosen those two options because it's the most expensive and the least expensive. A and B will represent the construction, but really it's construction completion of 2023 or 2026. So for A is 2023 and B is 2026. Of course, council could choose to have a date later than that. It could be 2030, it could be this isn't binding. This is really just give a high level of what to expect in those scenarios. Alright, so over here we have for each option that was analyzed, we have a breakdown a bit like I showed you for option 4. Essentially, I'll just take your attention to the three bottom rows, I guess, which would be the impact really that's being evaluated here. So the first one being the borrowing, the percentage of the borrowing capacity that's being used up by that loan. So we can see that it varies from 40% to 80%. And I'll be talking more about the borrowing capacity in future slides, just to explain a bit more what that means.
Yeah, can you just, I don't know if you're doing it later, but just explain the difference between the actual borrowing capacity and the self-imposed limit that we've set?
You just mentioned that's in a couple of slides from now.
The next slide will actually really detail what that means. The 50% versus 25% of our net revenues. The next line would be the required property tax increase for debt payment. So that's over and above the recreation complex spending strategy where we do increase by 150,000 every year. This would be what's the increase on top of that. So here we see that there's a variation between 5.9% and just over 20%, depending on the scenarios that are chosen. And to put that into dollar value of this, so here we have a high level estimate. It's hard to say in 2023 or in 2026 what those percentages are going to be exactly on the taxpayer's money or tax bill. But this is what we're trying to show here is, for example, if we were to go forward with option 4 rate, then in 2023 you could expect a tax increase of about $320 per year on your tax bill, versus option 5B that you would have a $94 increase as of completion of construction.
And
You will
again-
debate, and again here this is strictly for the payment of the debt.
Payment of the debt, and that's not on top of the annual increase of 1.05% until that point in time.
This is on top of that.
That's on top of that, right? So we're talking about, yes, 20%, but from 2019 to then, we already increased 5-6%.
That's correct.
Okay, just to clarify.
And we will refer back to that concept a bit later on. Any questions regarding this table?
No, that's it.
All right, so this next slide is just to give council a bit of a recap about our municipal debt policy. It's essentially in April of 2018, council adopted a municipal debt policy where we've identified criterias for the use of debt, limits, and the best practices. Essentially where I want to bring the focus here is regarding our self-imposed limitations. First, I want to just talk about the regulation from the province. We are regulated by the province not to go above 25% of our net revenues. When I say that, I'm talking about our annual repayment for all our debts in the township. We're legislated not for those annual payments to go above 25% of our net revenues.
Right, so if we're bringing in $100 of revenue, the province says we're not allowed to spend more than $25.
That's exactly right. So what we had included into this debt policy is self-imposed limitations. Essentially, this is just to ensure prudent management of our capacity, to ensure we do have funds available if ever something unforeseen happen. We see stories about bridges collapsing and things like that. We try to manage our infrastructure correctly, but we know that we are exposed to that type of risk. So our self-imposed limitations that we've included in the policy was for all tax-supported expenditures, or for tax-supported debt payments, not to exceed 10% of our tax-supported own source revenues. For our total debt payments, we self-imposed a limit of 15% versus the 25% that the province has imposed on us. And for user rate revenues, if it's from water and sewer, we've imposed ourselves a limit of 15% of our user rate revenues, as opposed to that 15 global limit.
Councilor Tomasky?
As we move forward with the asset replacement funding, when we self-fund that, is it safe to say, and I'm not arguing for it, but is it safe to say that we're going to be more protected against those unforeseen circumstances, and therefore that self-imposed isn't as important? I'm not saying that I don't agree with it, because I like that, I'd like to borrow less.
I mean, through you, Mr. Mayor, so to answer your question, Councilor Tomasky, so it is safe to say that they're perfectly correlated. I mean, if we've identified an infrastructure gap at the 2019 budget of 2.5 million, and we do have a goal of reducing that by 20% during this council term. By doing that reduction, we are definitely less exposed to the risk, and we're constantly looking to with consultants at ways to have best practices for our asset management strategies, to better identify risk and priorities in our yearly budget. So if definitely by moving forward with those initiatives and best practices, it's another way to reduce the risk factor of being exposed to those.
Just to highlight for all the residents, just something you just said, I just want to clarify. So essentially, the asset management shortfall that we have in our infrastructure is basically, if we wanted to keep the same level of service that we currently have right now in our roads, bridges, all that kind of stuff, we actually have a shortfall of 2.5 million a year. Is that correct?
So basically that's the concept. The 2.5 million is the best number that we can present based on the data that we do have. We're included in our asset management strategies is to have condition assessment protocols and kind of routine condition assessments done, so that we have always up-to-date information and to be able to give you the best information possible, not only on condition but on best practices regarding infrastructure investments, right? So it's not always letting your road go until it's broken and then creating a new one, right? So there's different investment types to make it the life cycle costs to reduce them. Right. So we're bringing different initiatives. One is, yes, the increase in infrastructure fund, which is essentially the tax money that's going towards our infrastructure, but also to implement some efficient asset management strategies that's going to help reduce that.
Right, because the infrastructure fund is recent in the next, I think, a few terms ago, it was put in place about 10 years ago, and we've continuously increased that fund because, I think it's up to 1.7, 1.8?
It's at 1.9 in 2019. So it started, I think it was 1 million in 2010, and in 2019 it's at 1.9 million.
But the ultimate goal is to get to the point where we can make sure that we cover our assets.
Exactly, and the annual requirements that currently. So our current annual requirement that we've identified in the last budget was 4.4 million. So with that 1.9 million, we do have a $2.5 million shortfall. So we're working on with strategies if we can bring that 4.4 down, and also by increasing our infrastructure funds. So we're bringing that 1.9 up so that we can meet.
Right, because we've been asking grants for bridge repair and that kind of stuff over the last few years. Not necessarily successful. We've been turned down numerous times on grants. Those would definitely help alleviate the asset replacement concern. But we're always looking for those ways of streamlining that process.
That's right.
Councilor, is that?
And you're almost damned if you do when you budget properly and you do things right. You don't get the money, and the municipalities that don't budget properly and in dire need, and their roads or their bridges are failing miserably, then those fundings go to them when we've done everything right, everything that they've asked us, and we can't get the funding because, well, you guys are doing it so well, do it yourself. That's just a comment. Sticker shock, I wanna make sure I understand this piece. So the 80% that you're talking about of the self-imposed limit, and because this is a recreation project, we're talking about the 10%, correct?
Yes.
So I just wanna make sure we're clear that that would use up 80% of the 10% factor, still leaving 15% under the municipal act of available funds to be used should emergencies arise. I wanna make sure people don't think, oh, we're gonna limit ourselves to, you know, we've used 80% of our money that could potentially be used under the act. Well, no, that's under the 10% self-imposed, still leaving a full 15% plus whatever that difference is. And if it's 10% there, 80% times 2%. So it's still leaving 17% under the act.
Monsieur Leduc, Monsieur Godin.
Through Mr. Mayor, so, not quite, but close. It's actually 80% of the 15%. So when I'm mentioning 80%, I'm not referring to that 10% limit that we have on tax supported revenues. We also have a global self-imposed limit on 15% of our global net revenues. Right, so we have those three different limits that we impose ourselves. 10% of tax supported revenues, 15% for water and sewer revenues, but an overall 15% of all our revenues. The province, the 25% from the province is 25% of all our net revenues.
Right.
So here the 80% is really 80% and 15% of all those revenues. And
So we're going over our 10% allocation then? Is that what you're telling me?
we're gonna see that in the next slides with the graphics, we're gonna see a lot better. But that's not necessarily what it means in the sense that the 10% isn't based on the same denominator as the 15% is. The 15% is based on all our net revenues, whereas the 10% is based strictly on the tax supported revenues. But yes, in essence, if we were to go with that worst case scenario of 80%, then definitely we'll go over our self-imposed limit. And you will see that in 3 slides from now.
Okay.
And just to confirm, this isn't taking into account all the other major projects that council is discussing. Servicing of the 417 industrial park at $20 million, Limoges, well, the ambulance is in this year's budget, but there's significant other projects the township is looking at as well.
Also, we do have existing debt,
Yeah.
and those will all be shown in a couple of slides from now.
Perfect, thank you.
And just to finish on this slide, I just want to mention as well, this is a self-imposed limit, and we do, we presented it to council because of the unit, but I mean, it is up to council to respect that limit or not. By resolution, you could choose to go over it. The 25% net revenue, from the province, however, is not that flexible.
It's not that flexible. As you mentioned, it's proper prudence, if you will. I mean, I'd love to have the big house and the big boat and the big cottage, and I could probably afford the payments. But if I go that route and in 10 years something happens to my roof and I have to replace it, well, I might find myself in trouble. Like we've seen in other sports complexes in other municipalities.
That's right. So the following 3 slides, I'm just gonna kind of illustrate what I've explained to you just in visual graphics.
Mr. Godin, I've been going for an hour and 45 minutes. I need to stretch my legs. I think some people would like to be able to use the washroom as well. So we'll take a 10-minute break. We'll be back at 5:02. Thank you.
T'avais-tu le webcam sur ton ordi?
Si je le poignais, oui.
Ben, ça jouait sur les speakers.
Mais que j'ai pas de son. Peut-être mon père.
merci tout le monde. Welcome back, everyone in the audience at home. I'm sure there's some interesting discussions during the 10-minute break, but we're back on track, and I'll ask Monsieur Godin to please continue with your presentation.
Merci, Monsieur Maire. So the next 3 slides is just to give a bit of a visual of the implications on our borrowing capacity regarding the 4 options that we've isolated here are options 4A, 4B, 5A, 5B, which represent the highest cost and the lowest cost, and a timeline of 2023 versus 2026. So this first graph here is basically the two dotted lines are our borrowing capacity. So the red one on top is the legislative one, so the 25% of our net revenues, which we can see in 2019 represents $5.7 million. The green one is our self-imposed, so that would be the 15% of our total net revenues, which is $3.4 million in 2019. And the 4 lines represents the 4 options, and basically it's the 4 options just on their own. This isn't considering any other loans that we do have, like we do currently have, or that are proposed in the upcoming years. This is strictly to show kind of if we look at the yellow line, well, that's where we see the 80%. It's the 3.5 versus the 4.3 million.
So just to confirm, if I take your yellow line at 3.5 million, our self-imposed limit is 4.4 million roughly. So we're talking less than 900,000. And if the line above that is 7.3 million, that's the limit of the province.
That's
so
correct.
We're only talking about a few $1 million difference as far as the capacity to pay for stuff.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so
So
you mean-
because like I said, we have $20 million projects for
Right.
servicing and that kind of stuff. So.
Right. And we'll see the impact of those projects in the next slide.
Okay.
So in this slide here, those 2 dotted lines are the same. So we again have our 25% of our net revenues. We have the 15% of our net revenues. The bars that we see at the bottom in orange are those represent our existing debt payments. So that borrowing capacity is occupied. The blue bars is basically a list of major projects that could potentially result in a loan. I haven't included in this presentation the list. We went through it at the budget, first when we did the debt policy and then again at the budget session. Essentially there's a 417 potential servicing of the industrial park. We have a library. We have the ambulance building as well, and a few other projects that may necessitate loans.
Right, but in this we didn't, I believe we don't have the servicing of our side of Limoges.
No,
not
that's correct.
included.
That's not included at this point in time. And we've also excluded, in that initial presentation we made at the budget presentation, included in there was the red complex, but we've excluded that to show the impact.
And just to confirm, the 417 was at the numbers back then. We know that there's significant increases for that as well.
Right, so the 417 number that's included here is $13 million. So we know that a total project cost is going to be higher than that. Regarding the financing of it, we haven't came back to council for that, so that definitely will have impact on this table, on this graphic. So essentially, if you look at the different lines, I'll just talk on the yellow line just to explain what it means. The yellow is option 4A, so it's a 2023 construction completion, so the annual repayments on the debt will start in 2024. So we can see in option 4A, which is like I said, the most expensive option, the debt payment added to the current debt payments and to the other projects that may have to be incurred from now to then. We're very close to that line, so we can see that our margin for unforeseen events is shortened there, so we're exposed to a higher risk at that point in time. If we take option 5B, which is a less expensive, and if we take it in 2026, we can see that with that option, we would actually be below our own self-imposed limit at that point in time, which is a payment of $4.5 million. But this is just to give you kind of a range of the lowest cost, the highest cost, and the impact that weighting has as well.
Councillor Janoski?
Just want to make sure that I totally understand. So if I look at option 4A, is the assumption correct, saying that we would be above our self-imposed borrowing capacity from 24 to 30, and then we would be back in line with our self-imposed borrowing capacity?
Right, so
Okay.
that's correct. That's, you mentioned option 4A?
That's right.
Yes, that's correct, yeah.
Okay,
Exactly.
thank you.
So one thing that I did mention that this graphic does show is that our borrowing capacity does increase at a yearly rate. The trend that we've applied here is based on historical trends in the last few years, last 5 years or so, which is a 5% increase every year. So a lot of things come into factor into that is our tax increases or our growth, more revenues from growth, more revenues from user fees for water and sewer as well, because we have more units being serviced. So that's where that increase comes from. So again, that talks to the impact of waiting if the project is done at a later date. Yes, the project will be more costly because of indexation and inflation, and our borrowing capacity will also be higher, so that it kind of balances out.
Councillor Lai?
I know at one point, and I don't know if it's still going on or not, that the province was entertaining the option of removing the user fee debt from the debt capacity. Is that still something that's being talked about? Because I mean, we know for a fact that our current debt load is 80% user fee, which is the water system.
Right.
Monsieur Leduc?
Mr. Mayor, Conseil, I know that many municipalities were actively pursuing that probably 5 years ago, but the last 2-3 years I haven't heard many moving the province to go that route. So I doubt that's being on the table right now.
Because that's and obviously that's where most of our debt lies right now, under that user pay system, so.
Right. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So just to follow up on that, like we do see here, if we just look at our current debt, as of 2028, that orange line stabilizes to 891, and that does $891,000, and that does kind of represent that loan that we do have for the water system.
Conseiller Buisson?
Mais comme que vous avez mentionné, ça c'est des chiffres avec le coût du projet comme c'est là. Mais justement, si on le pousse en 26, avec comme l'augmentation qu'on a vue, pas réalistiquement, notre graphique va être plus haut que ça. Parce qu'avec tous les coûts qui montent.
Donc, pour répondre à votre question, on a pris en considération un taux d'indexation de 2,5% ici. Donc, le coût en 2026 serait plus élevé qu'en 2023.
OK, c'est pas la même dette, c'est pas le même montant, il y a eu le taux d'indexation.
Exactement.
OK, c'est bon.
So this third final graphic, essentially here we're showing the same as the previous graph, except we're showing strictly our tax-supported self-imposed limit. So basically that 10% of all tax-supported revenues. We can see here that we have a greater impact because the 10% is a smaller number. In 2024, 10% of our tax-supported revenues is estimated to be 2.1%, which would be that limit that we're self-imposing on us. Both options from 2023 construction would bring us above that limit. Actually, the options from 2026 as well would temporarily bring us above that limit for a year or two, depending on what options are chosen. So again, this is strictly on the 10% limit that we impose ourselves on the tax supported debt. Any questions?
Yes, sir. No?
All right, so the final two slides. This slide over here, I just want to mention The numbers you're gonna see here are briefly different than what you've had in the package. We made a minor update just regarding the operational costs, which had been updated, after the completion of the presentation. So we're just talking about, like 0.5 percentage points, so it's not a big change, but just so you know, this is the updated, presentation. We're showing here the kind of a breakdown of the operational budget. Again, this does not include asset management. The idea kind of being that if we do a 20-year loan, and if we have significant annual payments on the loan, and then after year 20, we could use those funds that are available to cover any asset management requirements. So that's why we didn't at this point in time include nothing in the operational budget. But this is based on the numbers from the report. For estimated revenues, we took a 55% of the expenses. The report mentioned that the revenues are usually about half or a bit more or a bit less than half of the cost. We estimated 55, just based on the fact that with our current arenas, we already are collecting just over $600,000, so we thought it reasonable to assume that we would at least collect that. But again, if we do move forward with a group of options or scenarios to analyze deeper, we're going to be looking specifically at programming and user fees and more accurate numbers. But to give you an idea, the third column shows you the municipal contribution, which essentially is the tax levy used to finance the operations of the rec complex. So we're looking at a variance or a range from $337,000 to just over $560,000.
Si je regarde une fois, comme quand tu as l'augmentation équivalent des taxes, là, dans l'option la plus dispendieuse, la 4, ça te dit 3,6, mais ça serait de plus que quand on a vu le calendrier, le tableau tout à l'heure, juste pour la construction, tu as de 20, donc ça serait une augmentation de 23-24% pour avoir le complexe, pour l'opérer puis le bâtir.
Monsieur Mayor, donc c'est ça qu'on s'est vu. Le tableau ici, c'est vraiment strictement pour le côté opérationnel. Le prochain tableau, la prochaine diapo va montrer combiné si on ajoute le capital, la dette plus l'opérationnel. Si on met ensemble, ça va montrer c'est quoi les résultats.
Councilor Kamaski?
On ne nous a pas laissé finir, M. Godin, peut-être que vous alliez expliquer ça, mais la colonne qui dit Municipal Contribution to Arenas de 147 000 de 146 752, ça c'est la contribution que la municipalité fait pour opérer les deux arénas qui existent en ce moment. Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres coûts à ça? Ce que je me demande comme question, c'est si on ferme ces deux arénas, et puis on sauve 147 000 de frais opérationnels. Je regarde comme exemple le Twin Pad Auditorium numéro 5, c'est ce qui est comme moins cher, même Twin Pad Arena, c'est plus que le double dans chaque cas pour le coût opérationnel. Je voulais juste savoir qu'est-ce qui manque à ces 147 000-là. Les 147 000, ça ne peut pas être le coût total de l'opération des deux arénas.
Monsieur Leduc, Monsieur Godin?
Monsieur Mayor, donc, conseiller, je peux certainement avoir bien question, mais oui, le 146 000, ça représente la différence. Encore là, c'est strictement opérationnel, mais c'est la différence entre nos revenus des deux arénas ensemble versus les dépenses opérationnelles des deux arénas. Donc, ça ne prend pas en considération les dépenses capitales mais côté opérationnel.
Okay, so let me clarify. I'm sorry if I wasn't clear, but so if according to this, we're using $147,000 a year to run the two arenas, or it's costing the municipality above the revenues that we're getting. So we're in the red by $146,752. So we're going to remove that by closing those two arenas. And if I look at the cost of running twin pads in an auditorium, as an example, or twin pads or three arenas, if you want, it's like $370,000. Why such a big gap? That's, I guess, just a question.
Monsieur Leduc, Monsieur Godin?
Through Mr. Mayor, so yes, I understand your question on Councilor Kanowski, and I did also ask myself that same question. Basically, we're going, the decision when we finalize this presentation is really to go with the report was telling us, given that it's really a high level and we haven't dug in deeper into the revenues and the expenses specifically for all those options. So if you look, like you said, option 6, 337,000, that's the contribution calculated based on the cost in the report and the 55% of revenues. It's almost twice what it is right now for both of our arenas. I understand. And we, at this point in time, ourselves, I mean, we don't really have any knowledge of, it's still a different facility altogether than what we currently operate. And I agree that there might be assumptions that with cost efficiencies of having both ice pads at the same place, the municipal contributions could be lower, but there are other factors to take into consideration regarding the lobby space, regarding the auditoriums and the swimming pool and all that. So we didn't want to present numbers that go against the report at this point in time, and preferably just wait until we have more specific scenarios to analyze really deeper. Right?
So it should be noted that that's a major gap.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I think earlier when we spoke about having a really cost analysis of what are these things actually going to cost, I think that's where this comes into play is, okay, we really need to, from an operational point of view, try and figure out exactly what is 2 ice pads going to cost, what's 3 ice pads going to cost, what's a pool going to cost, what's an auditorium going to cost. And once we have those more precise numbers, then that'll help us in regards to decision making from an operational standpoint. Monsieur Gallet? Excuse, Conseiller Lair?
Yeah, I mean, we gotta, my assumption, maybe I'm wrong, is that we have 2 old arenas using old technology, and now we're gonna convert to 2 brand new arenas or 3 brand new arenas that have up-to-date technology, up-to-date efficiencies. Yeah, it's gonna cost us twice the amount of municipal contribution to run. I agree, it makes
They're all 3 the same place.
absolutely no sense to me. And I think the revenue piece is key, because we could be using 1, 2, or 3 arenas year round. That, we're using revenues based on what we're using today. Well, today we don't run an arena past the month of April. We don't run an arena before the month of August. And, I mean, I'm not suggesting that we use 3 arenas all year round. They're gonna burn out a little quicker, but, you're rotating around, you're using 1 or 2 one year, you use 2 different ones the next year, you use 2 different ones the year after that. And, you preserve the lifespan of those arenas, but those are key factors of ice rentals that are being used all year round versus just, from September to April. So I think we need to make sure we're accounting for those properly when we're doing that, and using obviously the most efficient materials that can be put in place to ensure that we don't have that operational shortfall of double what we currently have.
Monsieur Gallet?
Merci, Mr. Matt. So completely agree with all the comments and we're taking note of it, but yes, like I mentioned, when we do a more comprehensive and deep analysis, those are going to be taken into consideration. So essentially, yeah, so when we present the net impact on municipal contribution, it's the difference between the municipal contribution or the tax levy presented from those estimates and the current tax levy from the existing areas. So basically, this is assuming that if we move forward with any of these options, and that's not necessarily the case, but that's the assumption that was made in this analysis, is that both arenas will be shut down and replaced by a rec complex. So that's why we're deducting the current municipal contribution.
Right, and that, you mentioned shutting down both arenas, existing arenas. While there's land there available for sale, if we want it, right?
One of them.
But we own the land on both.
I don't know about the Russell one, whether we own that land or.
I believe we own the land itself, a foot around the building, but it is still our land. But there's potential to sell off property to help lower costs in regards to what we do. I think it's going to be a tough decision for council to have is to, you know, what services are we willing to cut back to increase our level of service right now? I mean, we can't just sit back and say, we're keeping everything and we keep piling on, especially with this provincial government who wants us to find efficiencies because they're considerably sending cuts our way. But, no, there is a potential for other revenue sources, most definitely.
Definitely, Mr. Mayor, so that's why, and that's also why in one of the first slides, we did keep one of those lines at 0, but just to mention that there is potential to go out there and potentially have partnerships or decommissioning or sale of land or arenas, and maybe grants are gonna come up as well, which would be great. And basically just to finish on this table, the last two columns is just to explain, okay, well, what is this, the net impact on the municipal contribution, what does it mean? The equivalent tax increase in percentage, we see it can range from 1.4% to 3.1. And again, here, we're talking about just the operation side, so basically this is on top of percentages that were already shown for the loan and the one also for the strategy that we're increasing on a yearly basis. And in dollars, that would represent between $23 for option 6 and about $49 for option 4.
But as you mentioned, we really have to do an analysis on the potential revenues and the expenses side of this.
That's correct.
This endeavor. Councilor Lorraine, Councilor Associate.
When, maybe I'm not seeing it there, but is it showing the actual dollar amount that the percentage equates to?
Very last column.
Very last column? Okay, I can't see. Just so we understand, when we say 3.1, 2.4, that we're talking about
Yep.
$20, $30, $40.
This is just for the operational.
Yes,
Right.
but I wanna keep it into perspective, right? You know, we all talk about, percentage increase, which is in Russell Township is different than Ottawa, different than Toronto, different than all these other municipalities, and
Right.
we wanna make sure we're equating the right actual dollar figure to the average percentage,
Exactly.
to the average household value that we're talking about. So 1% this year was $16, $17, something? $16 for every 1% that was increased, so.
Exactly. Okay.
Just wanna make sure we keep it in perspective.
Right, so we do see that in the last column, and we're talking about a range of $23 to $49 for the operations.
I apologize for my eyesight. Got older yesterday, so.
Councilor Associate.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we do, I know it's the early preliminary stages and we have a lot of discussion to do, but that the affected groups would be part of the process, because I'm thinking of the fair. That entire building is utilized during the fair. Like the ice slab, the upstairs, the whole, so when the fair is being run in the church, which is coming up, so they would have quite an issue with not having that space. To make sure that.
Challenging discussions coming,
Yes.
most definitely. Last slide, Mr. Gade.
Merci, Mr. Mayor. So the last slide, basically, I'm bringing back all the options, breaking it down by tax increase dollar and percentage for the loan repayment, for the operational budget. So putting them together, we see it ranges again from, if we look at it from a dollar value to the tax bill, from $119 to $377. And what this does include, and I'm just mentioning it below the table, is that yearly increase from the actual rec complex fund strategy, the $150,000 that we are increasing the taxes every year, which represents approximately 1.05% yearly or $20 yearly on a residence tax bill. So again, depending on the timing of the project, if council chooses to go forward in 2023 and that we stop the increases then we're looking at 5 years, so that would be about $100 to add to those numbers.
Perfect, thank you very much, Monsieur Godin. Monsieur Leduc, we had two other appendix. I'm not sure if you wanted to touch on the other. There was the master plan appendix, and there was the condition summary of our existing arenas. I'm not sure if you wanted to touch those or not, Monsieur Godin.
So now, they were provided as a background information regarding what should be done as per the master plans and how our assets or conditions are. Donc pour les arénas, on avait une durée de vie jusqu'à 2035. Donc techniquement, les arénas avec un investissement de 50 000 $ par année pourraient faire durer la durée de vie des arénas jusqu'en 2035. Et aussi, le master plan de démontrer aussi le vouloir, the want of residents for a pool regarding a need. So those two documents were there for supporting documents for council to review and maybe base their questions on or see answers to their questions.
Conseil Laurent?
Yeah, the lifespan of the arenas, just want to touch on that one. Was that redone, or was that just taking information from 2014 master plan? Because my understanding from the previous works that we did, they had attributed about a 10-year lifespan for both arenas at that time, with significant increase in upkeep into the $1 million ranges for each facility, just to maintain them and to add additional lifespan. Now I'm hearing if we put, and I think the numbers are 250 in one and 350 in the other, total dollars over the next few years, that now I'm hearing 2035 that these arenas can last. There's no way that Emperor Arena is gonna last 2035. I mean, it's already what, 50 years old? I mean, you know, we have to consider the fact that these are old arenas, and they run on old technology, old systems, and we've already seen last year 2 arenas that failed miserably, where one of them had loss of life and the other one closed down, and they have no contingency plan for 2 years because the arena got shut down and they have to rebuild at that point in time. So yes, we save $50,000 a year. If we invest $50,000 a year, it'll last another 15 years. We also have to take into consideration it could also fail, and then we're stuck. We have nothing. So we can't wait 15 years to do something. We need to move sooner than that, and that's more to council than to staff. Is, it's great that we say if we put $50,000 a year in, it can last that long, but the reality is it won't.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, based on it was the 2014 master plan, this information is coming update, and that was based on the fact you're referencing that we didn't do any maintenance, that it had a 10-year lifespan. But obviously, as part of our operations, we do yearly maintenance in our arenas. I mean, the reality is, I understand that, yes, they're older arenas, most definitely. At the end of the day, I can drive from here to Ottawa, I can drive in a Cadillac, I can drive in a Pinto, I still get there. Yes, we need to see some improvements in our arenas, definitely, and I agree with you that we're not waiting until that long. I think we have to do it much sooner, but that's a report just so that we're aware that there is maintenance that can be done on the arenas just to continue lifespan, but I agree totally, we're not going that far. Madame Guitar?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. Just to be precise on this one, this condition assessment was done independently from the master plan. It was a condition assessment done on the structural buildings. It had nothing to do with the master plan, so just to be clear on that.
But in 2014.
2014, that's right.
Okay. D'autres questions comme ça? Councilor Kanaski?
So, a couple of points I wanted to make. So, first of all, I just want to make sure that I fully understand this. So, if you don't mind following my story here. So, if I want to go with option 3, the way I understand it, option 3, which would give me 3 ice surfaces and a pool, it would cost me $255 more for the average household per year. in today's dollars, plus the added funding that we've been increasing. So let's say in number 3, if we developed in 2023, we're talking an extra, what was it? 1 to 1.5% of
About
that.
5-6%.
So about 5-6%. So 5-6% in terms of dollars. Can you?
It was about $100 more.
It's about $100 more. So again, going back to my number 3. So for $350 roughly, I can have 3 new ice rinks and a pool in my township. Is what you're saying. And that, of course, doesn't include the fact that many of these establishments are nowadays developed in 3P, where we have a promise land, probably I would ask her about that, but that we have private-public partnerships, and so we haven't explored that, but that's an option. We have, as Madam Tremblay told me on break, that we have these great organizations here within our township limits that may be of interest, or certainly, I mean, it's proven that it does work, and so I think that has a major potential for that. But that's good to know. And the only other thing that is 2 other points I wanted to make in this whole presentation so far is that it'd be interesting to see this, because we talked about going in stages. So something where we start with, let's say a pool, and then we add the rinks, in 3 years and so on, because we can all conceptualize what that would look like, but I think that it would be certainly more affordable to do it in stages, even though there's economies of scale to be made when building it together. And then one last question I had, in terms of the project itself, is there contingency costing involved when we do these capital kind of forecasts? Like, do you put in a contingency, like, so all the costing, all the dollar values that were put in here, is that just based on today's dollars? I guess there must be some sort of buffer put into that, right?
There is. We basically took a per square foot rate that we have, and we bumped it up using the contingency factors we generally use.
Okay.
So it's contained in that.
Can I ask you, what is that factor? If it's simple, is it a percentage of the per square foot?
Yeah, there are a few percentages we factored in for soft costs, hard costs.
Also depending on,
Yeah.
okay, I see. Okay, but they're factored.
They are factored.
Okay, thank you.
Parfait, Monsieur Leduc?
I believe that information would be on the report on page 6, where it shows that soft costs are between 12 and 15%.
Yeah, we went with the 15%.
D'autres questions? OK. S'il n'y a pas de questions du membre du conseil, the next item is a question period for the meeting of the day. So this is a question period to ask a question. It's not to give your opinion or to say what you would like to see. If you have a question for our consultants or for our administration, now's the time to ask the question. I just want to specify that because I know there's some people that would like to give an opinion, but we could be giving an opinion here till midnight. So we have a time frame we like to get through. So if anybody has a question, I invite you to come up to the lectern and pose your question, state your name and address for the record, please.
Can I break the ice?
Ask a question.
What pad? Pardon? What pad are you going to break the ice on? My name is Philippe Ryan. I'm a resident résident d'Embrun. Puis-je parler en français?
Les deux, n'importe laquelle.
Très bien. Alors, dans les études qui ont été faites, est-ce qu'il y a une étude qui démontre combien d'argent je peux sauver simplement en étant le père de 2 enfants qui jouent au hockey? Puis, je regarde, disons, les chiffres, puis je vois l'option la plus dispendieuse qui est 377 $, mais quand je regarde l'argent qu'on a dépensé cette année pour aller, cet été, on est allé à des pratiques au Ridgecraft, Complexe. Je regarde quand on essaie de tous les parents d'arriver à Chesterville ou bien Croydon, mais à Finch, à des pratiques à 4 heures ou 5 heures, c'est pratiquement impossible pour être là, toute l'équipe. Quand on coach, mais c'est important d'avoir tous les joueurs là pour qu'on ait une bonne pratique. Là. Alors, je regarde, même si ça peut représenter beaucoup d'argent, je regarde, disons, les bénéfices qui peuvent être associés à avoir, disons, ces facilités-là ici. Est-ce qu'il y a quelque chose qui a été fait par rapport à ça?
Monsieur Leduc?
Monsieur le maire, monsieur le conseil, je pense que pour commencer, on va parler de. Il y a peut-être environ 6 000 unités domiciliaires dans la municipalité. On va supposer ça. Donc, combien de parents sont de hockey par rapport aux 6 000 propriétaires? Donc, on n'a pas fait aucun calcul pour ni un ni l'autre. Ceux qui ont personne qui joue au hockey, puis ceux qui ont un enfant qui joue au hockey. Donc, c'est pas là présentement. Mais évidemment, c'est une minorité de foyers qui participent au hockey mineur plutôt que la majorité qui, sur les 5 000 ou 6 000 foyers qu'on a dans la municipalité.
Conseiller Lorraine, conseiller Thomasky.
But we can't just think about the hockey, right? We got to think about if we're talking option 4A, as Mr. Ryan just said, which encompasses a pool and which would encompass a theater. Now you're talking kids that go into Ottawa for swimming lessons, seniors that go into Ottawa for swimming courses and programming. You're talking people that go into Ottawa for different programming, theatrical programming, even computer program, whatever type of programming that isn't available in our municipality today needs to be taken into account when we're talking about a $538 or whatever the number is increase in terms of costs that those families are spending to go outside of the municipality to get services. So, you know, if we're not factoring those in, you know, we can't just say, you know, I'm passionate about the hockey because that's what I know. That's what I'm living day to day, and that's what a lot of the people that I know that are involved in want to see. So we talk about hockey a lot, but it's not just hockey. You know, figure skating, ringette, broomball. You know, so there's many different components to the ice factors. But then if we're talking pool factors, then we're talking auditorium factors. So we need to make sure we're encompassing all of those factors and not just focusing on the hockey as well. I just wanted to add to that.
I think the reality is, I don't think there's an easy way to get all those numbers. How you justify getting all those numbers for those different groups would be mind-boggling, I believe. I see this process, obviously this is the biggest project we've looked at in the township history. We're looking at going to serious public consultation meetings where we get feedback from the public. Where I see this going, and of course it's with the approval of council, is I see this going in a scenario where we will riddle down a few different scenarios. And we know now with new technology that we can hold a referendum or a plebiscite in our municipality for 15,000, 20,000, I think is what the last election cost us. So we'll be able to give every resident, every elector in the municipality an opportunity, if council so chooses, to actually vote on different options. That's where I see this process going. We set the timeline and say, you know what, in the next 6 months, the next year, we set up a full consultations. We tell the public what's the facts. This option will cost you this much. This option will cost you this much. This will cost you that much. And then residents will have the option to actually vote and say, you know what, I prefer this option. I'm willing to pay an extra $300 a year or an extra $400 a year. And at that point in time, we'll have considered everybody. You know, I think that's the only realistic way to get everybody's feedback, because trying to go to, we'll say, the different organizations, okay, how many people in this organization are going to Chesterville or this or that, we'll never be able to figure that out. But I think if we go to public consultations and we give the public an ability to put a check mark next to the options and truly provide the communication plan for everybody to understand what's involved, I think that's where people will be able to make a decision and give their feedback to council. That's just my thought process. Obviously, there's a lot more information to look at, but I think that that's the only way we'll get a true picture of what, because you're saying you were willing to pay 500, maybe somebody isn't, maybe somebody's willing to pay 1,000. You know, if 100% of the population comes up, or 80% say, yeah, we're willing, we want the big $55 million project, well, that makes it easy for council. But we need to be able to go to the public and get that information. And I think that's the easiest, most efficient way to do so. Councilor Tomasky?
C'est une très bonne question, M. Ryan. Je suis super content d'entendre ma mère comme expliquer comment on va le faire. Puis je suis content qu'on va aller de cette direction-là parce que c'est à la population de nous dire à quoi ils sont prêts, c'est quoi la demande de la population. Moi, je sais en tant que résident, parlant depuis longtemps, que ça fait longtemps qu'on en parle de vouloir avoir des nouvelles surfaces de glace. C'est ça depuis mes enfants, et j'ose plus le hockey ici, mais c'est ça qui, je trouve que c'est ça qui va être bon, c'est que ça va être la population qui va revenir nous dire qu'est-ce qu'ils sont prêts à payer. Puis une fois qu'on a ça, nous autres, ça rend la décision super facile. Je pense que le plus dur en ce moment, ça va être à nous autres de trouver comme les 4-5 options qui sont les plus raisonnables, ou bien qui représentent le meilleur choix. Mais ça va être à la population de dire, puis ça va être à nous de s'assurer qu'on donne l'outil, qu'on donne la voix à la population pour le faire. Moi, je suis super excité, super content qu'on ait une direction qu'on s'en va vers cette direction-là.
Councilor Sosia?
Yeah, well, I was just gonna say, I think it'd be easy to get those stats, like if we had a monkey survey or something and put it out and just people would say how many people in their family, like that. I've got 3 kids that are traveling to Ottawa for Minto Skating Club. And then, you know,
the issue with that is, I'm a pool parent or I'm a hockey parent, I'm gonna fill in that survey 50 times, right? Because that's how SurveyMonkey works. You can just keep going and going and going. There's the plebiscite, if you will, the referendum, if you will, is the only structured way to make sure it's 1 vote per elected.
You can't make it up, they can only fill it out once, and then it shuts down.
I got 3 different computers at home, you know. The technology, if somebody wants to cheat the system, they're going to cheat the system.
It's like voting once.
You vote, you give your vote, everybody over the age of 18 in the municipality gets a vote. There you go. If I remember well, an election was roughly $15,000-$20,000. We'd have to double check, but even then, on a $50 million project, I think that's a very small price to pay to get the public input on what's going to directly affect them, possibly considerably.
Puis l'autre point comme qu'on a discuté, c'est sûr qu'il va falloir retravailler sur les chiffres beaucoup pour voir vraiment qu'est-ce que ça coûte. Puis que là, comme on disait, c'est à 50% du coût d'opération estimé. De vraiment dire, OK, l'aréna, c'est tel, la piscine, c'est tel, avec des choses, en ayant fait des recherches à d'autres places qui ont des piscines, à d'autres places qui ont des auditoriums, puis les arénas, on sait un peu parce qu'on l'a déjà, mais c'est pour ça qu'il va falloir travailler sur nos chiffres, pour voir vraiment, dire, quand que le monde arrive, dire, OK, ben, ça va nous coûter, c'est-tu vraiment 300$, puis là, justement, justifier tous ces coûts-là.
Merci.
D'autres questions? Other questions?
Moi, s'il vous plaît, M. le maire, merci. Vous avez dit pas de commentaires, mais je voudrais faire... OK, je vais faire la question suivante d'abord. Dans le rapport que ces gens-là ont fait, que Collier a fait, c'est très bien, à la fin, là, j'ai remarqué que la directive donnée par le Conseil était de sorte de se plafonner, d'avoir un cap de 35 millions. N'est-ce pas que c'était comme ça écrit, là?
Le cap?
C'était 22. Je ne sais pas si eux ont majoré ou vous avez majoré. Ou...
Non, monsieur
je sais que c'est plus son chiffre-là qu'on veut, là, mais...
Non, monsieur Leduc va expliquer.
Lorsqu'on travaillait sur les frais de développement, il était question d'un projet de 22 millions. Aux dernières discussions, avant de donner le mandat aux consultants, on a demandé au conseil jusqu'où vous seriez prêt à travailler pour qu'on vous présente un projet de site. Donc, c'est pour ça qu'on avait avancé les chiffres de 35 millions.
Okay.
Donc, c'était pour la raison que 35 millions est apparu dans le rapport.
Merci. Alors, voici ma question. Après avoir lu ce rapport-là, on remarque qu'il n'y en a seulement qu'une qui a fait le plafond, là. Les autres ont dépassé ce plafond-là. Alors de base, je me dis, il y a un message également là-dedans, c'est que peut-être qu'il va falloir regarder très attentivement pour suivre vos conseils, là. Je ne voudrais pas avoir votre mal de tête, moi, là. Pour réellement prendre des décisions. Il me semble qu'on n'est pas tout à fait prêt à s'embarquer sans avoir réellement vérifié si le bateau ne s'écoule pas, là, pour voir réellement est-ce qu'on peut acheter ça, une affaire comme ça de 35 millions. Est-ce qu'on peut faire ça?
Oui, ben, c'est ça exactement. À soir, c'était vraiment préliminaire. C'est pour ça qu'on a donné des directions à l'administration. Il y a des chiffres qu'on veut avoir plus concrets. Il n'y a pas de décision ce soir qui est prise. Est-ce qu'on bâtit quelque chose ou non? Ça, c'est pas la discussion à soir du tout.
C'est sage.
Oui, c'est ça. C'est vraiment, comme j'ai dit, c'est un processus qui... On a besoin de l'information, puis on a besoin de plan de communication pour nos citoyens. Comme j'ai dit, c'est le plus gros projet qu'on fait dans la municipalité. On veut faire certain qu'on réussit bien.
D'accord.
Moi
aussi, j'aimerais juste rajouter que je suis en ligne avec votre pensée aussi, parce que ce qu'on n'a pas vu ce soir non plus, c'est des projets plus petits qui peuvent embarquer par étapes. Disons, on commence avec une piscine à 10 millions à place d'aller dans le 35 millions. Fait que ça aussi, ça va être à nous autres de discuter et d'arriver à une entente parce qu'on peut présenter des options qu'on peut se permettre.
OK. Moi, bon, vous avez dit pas de commentaire, mais je peux pas m'empêcher de dire. On a vu beaucoup de rapports, beaucoup d'études. Je voudrais m'assurer que personnellement, je félicite ces gens-là. C'est très clair, bien conçu, les options bien présentées, tout ça. Et puis, on peut faire notre conviction avec ce qu'ils nous présentent. Alors là, on suffit ça à vous, puis on vous passe le panier. Bonne chance.
Merci. Il faut que je félicite le conseil d'avoir pris la décision d'aller de l'avance avec l'étude. Moi, ça fait 20 ans que je suis ici, puis j'entends qu'à propos d'un complexe sportif, mais là, le conseil, vraiment, on est sérieux, on a mis de l'argent dans le budget, on commence à sérieusement regarder ça. Puis je pense que le conseil il a donné une direction qu'on s'en va de l'avance. Comment c'est fait, à quelle étape c'est fait, quelle année c'est fait, c'est encore à discuter, mais on s'en va de l'avance avec quelque chose pour améliorer la récréation dans la municipalité, ça c'est certain. Question? Name and address, please.
Yeah, Joey Abrams, 125 Broadway in Russell. Excuse me, I see there's no phone signs everywhere, but that's what I use to write my notes, so.
It's all good.
I have a couple questions. I'll try to get through them as quickly as possible. My first question would be, has staff or council had any opportunity to look at other projects that happened? You know, the Minto Barhaven complex comes to mind because it's relatively new with respect to operation costs, because I know there was a big discrepancy we learned about here. You know, and then we get into needs and wants versus, I know they have a gymnasium. Is a gymnasium a bigger cash earner? Would that be better suited for the space it's going to take up than, say, an auditorium? And I'm not saying the auditorium's great, but have those kind of discussions happened?
Yeah. So at this point in time, Collier's in the report gave some examples of projects, but that's definitely something that the administration, when they're looking at revenues and costs, definitely reach out to other municipalities and see, you know, can we get those numbers? We don't need to necessarily reinvent the wheel, but to understand what's going on elsewhere, that's just great practice.
And the DC charges, which was a great conversation, I'm looking forward to the next pack because I actually know what it is now. Are we able to find out what was used on other projects to get a kind of a better understanding of what legislation is in place that we're able to use? Because the numbers didn't make sense to me either, but I understand that we're working with a strict set of laws that not everyone really understands, I guess.
Right, so we usually, when it comes to DC charges, we actually have consultants that we hire. That'll be questions to be able to ask during those discussions. And again, with Bill 108 that just came out, you know, we don't have the final details. They're, you know, I was on a conference call with a bunch of other mayors in the government saying, why are you changing this? It works. But obviously somebody wanted to change and the government's changing it and it's been decided. So now they're just tweaking the legislation and they're going to give us information that we have to implement in a year's time, or roughly a year and a half. So there's going to be a lot of discussions. I think next year once we have the information about the legislation, we'll have so much of a better picture how this is going to affect us. I think timing on this particular part of it is just off, but we'll definitely have more information and discussions on DC charges for sure.
Okay. And one last question, is there any vehicle that allows you to look at the economic impact something like this would bring to the community and add to it in terms of lowering the cost maybe in the long run?
Lowering the cost as far as like the anticipated revenues that would.
Well, not only the anticipated revenue, but maybe high, we're experiencing growth now, but you get something like this, maybe the growth kind of obviously wouldn't be exponential, but it would create.
Yeah, it would have an impact.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think that we have an economic development department that could possibly have input into that file. Madame Tremblay?
Bonsoir. Yes, we did have the market analysis study that did consider if the dome were to be built, not the dome, but the complex would have to be built, then the impact that it would have on businesses and what new businesses would be more interested to come in the township if this would be built. So we have that study. Obviously, it's not
very high level.
High level because we didn't know what to expect back then when we did that study, but it's something that we could revise as soon as we know exactly what could be proposed in the project.
Perfect.
My gas bill was a lot higher than $377 driving my kid around all the time. So, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Councilor Associate?
This is for Madame Guitar. I'm mixing up Celine and guitar together. I just want to make sure that we're not duplicating, things that we already have. Like we have a really nice gym in the dome and the walking track. So I'm just wondering, do we need another one?
Madame Guitar?
And again, when we did the dome, we got a lot of flack from local businesses and other gyms as well. So that's just something to consider. And the other question I had, sorry, it's two different things, but it was brought up at the break. Will childcare be considered in the new complex? Like say if a parent wants to go swimming or take an aquafit class, and that would generate some revenue for as well.
I think at this point in time, as we mentioned,
too early.
it's very high level at this point. The programming side of stuff, that will come later. Madame Paul?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. So as for the gym, yes, we did have a very brief discussion about that. One option that we could have is move the gym to the complex and make our tennis courts bigger because they're very well used. So that would be one option. So no, we don't want to duplicate, that's for sure, because there's a lot of money involved in that. And yeah, so we will try instead of improving what we have.
Councilor Kanowski?
Sorry, I can't help it, but as a parent of someone who played hockey a long time and spent a lot of time in Smith Falls in their new walking track, that was pretty cool. Watch my kids practice and just exercise. Just say.
Just one other thing, whenever we'll have those numbers coming back to us to consider, we did talk about making steps, adding one, maybe the four, but we'll need to see what's the cost associated with this. Compare if we do the tree ring and the pole at the same time, what cost, but if we do just the pole and then we do the arena after, what extra cost that will be encountered to this to be considered? Does it work doing by phase or with the money that it would cost? But we might consider, okay, it's better to go at once at the same time, so just something to consider.
Monsieur Leduc, I see you and staff have taken notes all night. I'm sure you have a good idea of the questions council are looking for answers.
To my own conseil, all these questions are clear. What's not clear yet is priority. So when we get to the step of following the question period is which priority of this council want us to pursue first, and in what order, because we'll need some direction there before, because we can do all kinds of number crunching, but certainly a direction is needed before we do start
right? So if we would have had this meeting yesterday, my outlook would have been completely different as opposed to 4 hours ago. 4 hours ago, the provincial government announced that there is funding open for recreation. And projects up to $50 million can be submitted. That being said, there's no guarantee. They're looking at, there's a potential to get 75% of the costs of a project paid by the province and the federal government. And the time frame for application is November 3rd, I believe, or November 19th. Sorry? 11th. So essentially, I would like, ideally, if council is in agreement, what I would suggest is that we go for the Cadillac. We put everything down, we submit an application for everything that was presented. We know the costs, I think it's a short time frame and we have to move quickly on that. I believe though that the administration, the design, if you will, that will be presented in this application has to be an application designed in such a way that if we don't get the funding, then that comes back to council and say, look, we didn't get the funding, but we can either go with an arena first, with a pool first, and that'll be a discussion at that point in time. But with the fact that, because I think it's the first time since I've been on council that recreational funding of that magnitude has been available, I think we should definitely take the opportunity to apply for this funding. If the funding is not approved, then come back to council. Obviously, I'm expecting that all these questions will come back to council at one point in time to clarify some stuff. But we have an opportunity on a $50 million project to go get $35 million worth of funding. I don't think it's rocket science that we throw ourselves behind this application as fast as can be. Conseiller Larin?
I think a key component of that application would be the economic spin-off that I think it was Mr. Ryan or Mr. Abrams that were talking about that were taken in, that need to be taken into account when we're saying, from that market analysis that was done, if this is built, look what else can come. I think that would be a key factor in the proposal as well. On top of the residential growth and and the fact that we are doing things right, we have things put in the bank, we have the ability to maintain the rest of it and moving forward. So I think we need to refine those numbers a bit, take out some of the stuff that we don't necessarily want in the Cadillac. I'll use the example of the walking track. We've got one already 10 steps away that we're charging for today. So,
but I think the application doesn't have to go that much into detail. Just the general, they're giving municipalities 2 months to put something together realistically. So, and the project they have a timeline that the project has to be complete by the year 2027. So we have opportunities here where we could potentially do this thing and have very little impact on taxation. We have to move forward with that. So that would be my first recommendation. You're looking for what's next, Monsieur Leduc, is we're applying for this thing. Obviously bring back information, but again, I want to reiterate that whatever the design is, if council agrees, it should be able to, once that report, if we get the funding, great. If we don't get the funding, that design comes back to council, and council will be discussing, do we move ahead with 1, do we move ahead with 2, number 3, or do we do it all at the same time? And of course, if the funding doesn't come through, then we need a communication plan to how we're going to address the public and have them give their feedback on that project.
So a couple of points. You mentioned provincial, federal, so they're both funding equally?
No, if I remember well, it's 40% province, about 35% federal.
Okay. And then when we talked about 50 million, you mentioned 50 million, but then you mentioned 35 million funded, so you're saying 70% of that project there, up to 50 million? Is that?
Yeah, so they're saying it's, the project, they'll fund up to 50 million. So if we're doing a $58 million project, 55, we can get up to 75% roughly of the cost.
Okay.
Like I said, I skimmed the document, it came in at like 4:30 today.
That's amazing. So just to be clear, if we're going to apply for this grant, and if we're able to get it, then no referendum, we're buying a Cadillac.
You know what? With the essentially, I would say so, because we're talking about a $15 million investment.
Yeah.
I'm
with you on that. I just want to be clear that we're all on the same page. We're going to vote on that.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, that's my suggestion as far as direction
Yeah.
to the administration. If I see heads shaking, that's everybody seems to be in that direction, which it is.
And so just let me clarify then. So if they pay for 75% of the Cadillac, we'll buy the Cadillac. But if they pay for 10% of the Cadillac, we're going to talk about whether we're buying a Cadillac or something.
Yes. Yes.
So some really good Volkswagen.
Conseiller Lorraine and Chancellor Saucy.
So they say we have to have it in by November 11th, the application. Does it also say, basing it on?
I believe they skimmed through it, like I say, it came in around 4:30 today.
Did you happen to see when they said they would make a decision on applications?
Winter 2020.
Yeah, so they're looking
I just
at,
want to set the right expectation for the public as well.
yeah, so we should have an answer from the government. If I read it quickly, but it essentially, they're making sure to put a clause in there that the federal government has to approve, because obviously there's an election in the fall, so we don't know what's going to happen there. The next government can come in and say they're scrapping their portion and the whole program falls.
So has the Liberal government of the day said yes to the program, or
Well, this is
do we know
the
that
fourth part. Like they had the green fund in the early part of the year. Like this is the fourth intake in something that's already approved.
Okay.
But obviously, the province doesn't know what's happening at the federal level, so they want to cover their assets. So so from what I remember reading quickly the document, the timeline is fairly quickly, within the next 6 months, I'll say. They'll let us know whether our file gets moved up to the federal level for approval. So if the province looks at it, pushes it up to the federal level, and then we get an answer. There are some timelines on there, but I think in the scope of the project we're looking at, it's actually quite reasonable to be able to go for it and have an answer and still move ahead with the project if ever it doesn't happen.
Does it, I guess I can look at the document later, but I guess, does it talk about partnerships in terms of local sports teams or whatnot to enhance the project, to say, yes,
So the only clause that caught my eye was the fact that it has to be like a non-for-profit, like a municipality. If we partnered up with a for-profit organization, like a 3P project, it would not qualify.
No, I didn't mean for that. I meant tenant-wise, like people that were going to come in, let's use the example of, I think it came up earlier, of the Bell Sensplex that has, I believe it's Stanley's Restaurant up top. So they partnered with them to take that space, and they've got the Senators who use one of the rinks as their practice facility. I know CIH, when they did theirs, they had Hockey Canada in as a collaborator to the project. I'm just trying to see if that would help us in any way.
I think there's a lot of details, obviously, to go through. It's a multi-page document. I think that one option is, the timing is always great, right? That email comes in, and within 15 minutes, we have companies who are looking to offer their services to write this grant application for us to help get it, right? And we know how that works, you know, obviously they're in business for a reason. Usually what they do is they charge a percentage of whatever grant we receive. I think in the time frame, I think that's an administrative decision, whether they decide to use an outside source or, I mean, we're going into budget session. Staff have been concentrating on budget, you know, this is a big item. I would be comfortable if they decided to outsource that, but, you know, that's totally up to the administration's call. But yeah, definitely, I think there's an opportunity here that council has no choice but to go in that direction. I'll say you something.
One of the questions I had is if, because whenever up to now, it was okay, they would come back with some cost of operating also and everything. But the question is, like, with the three option, is it an auditorium we go for, or saying gymnasium is more like the place where they have the practices for gymnastic, things like that?
I think it's details that can be worked along as we go. Staff will be able to look at how detailed the project has to be. Is there flexibility in how we apply? Then council can have those directions, but I mean, it's, we have to be on top of the ball. Monsieur Leduc?
So, Malcolm, vous avez dit tantôt, we knew of this grant application 4 hours ago. So I would suggest to council that we, September 3rd, we just come back to council to say these are some of the details we've reviewed and have some concerns or need further direction regarding how to fill this application. But certainly give us time to review it and maybe report to council what needs to be done and who can we need assistance from to complete the application.
Councilor Tomowski, then Councilor Larry.
Just point out, I mean, we're gonna be ahead of many municipalities considering we just got this report fresh out of the oven with today's dollars and everything else, so that's amazing. I mean, really amazing by this organization.
And the nice thing is the fund they're talking about, they're talking potentially about $1 billion fund. 440 municipalities in Ontario. How many are at this stage? You know, I don't think there's going to be that many applications. There is funding for revamping existing buildings, which is like a $5 million, $10 million cap. But I think we're, you know, why not go for a $50 million project? I'll say that in, and Councilor Sosi.
I think as part of the direction, I think the direction is go forward with an application and go for the 4A. I think that's pretty clear to me. But I also want to make sure we don't lose that year of planning, right? I mean, we did that with other things in the past, and we've lost years. I mean, if we lose 1 year, we've lost 4 or 5 years because we got to catch up, and we can't do that. So we need to make sure that the process continues on as we're going, refining public consultation even, and doing other things that get us to the point of, yes, we get it, no, we don't. Well, if we don't, okay, well, now we've done all this, so we know what we need to do, and we continue to move forward rather than take a step back. So I think as part of the direction is, yeah, it's great, get the application in, but it doesn't stop there. We need to make sure we continue even up until the time when we get a decision, right?
That's great. So, Councilor Sosi?
Well, when you wait long enough, you get your questions answered. That was one of the things I was gonna comment on, and also the application, whether we were gonna go outside. But I think we should really emphasize the health aspect of a recreational facility like this and the well-being to the residents in our community, you know, and I mean, there's cutbacks in healthcare and what have you, so this is something that keeps people healthy and makes them well and feel good about their community. So I would include that in your application.
Thank you very much. I think we'll pull out all the stops for this application. Councilor Tomowski?
I would agree with Councilor Murray. I think that in addition to the direction of doing the application, which is obvious, I think we need to move ahead with like even a preliminary public consultation, like we did with the bicycle plan, where we can have an open house and have people start giving feedback, where we can start getting a better idea. We got presented some really great stuff here, But in the end, if we do have to make decisions, that'll be, I don't wanna fall behind on that. I think Councilor Loya has a really good point on that. Definitely, and in that same vein, I would also go back to that 3P, I'd like to start looking at opportunities for some partnerships as well. I think it's really good, we got a really good momentum.
There you go. So, Mr. Leduc?
Mayor, with all respect, we're going in every direction right now. I think we need to know what kind of project before we decide to know if we're going partnerships. So I think we would need to bring back to council further information regarding your questions of the night.
Yes.
And then from that point on, decide if consultation we're ready for it now or if the 3P is necessary. So I understand that we'd like to get everything done tonight, but certainly we'll have to come back to council and provide further information.
So how about, is it a reasonable time frame for the September 3rd meeting to bring a report in regards to the application itself? At the second meeting in September, to bring back the answers to our questions and to bring back a potential communication plan on how we can move forward to involve the public. Is that a realistic timeline?
There's many questions to be answered.
Okay.
Maybe some we could be left without an answer for that deadline of the 26th. Again, we're at 16, sorry, which is still within 4 weeks.
Yep.
And we're having consultants work for us. We need to consult with them to see their availability of their time and also extra costs involved in the study. So we have to make further
if possible, if not, I mean, we understand that there's a lot going on in the municipalities. There's not this project alone. We have multiple rabbits we're running after right now. But I trust the administration. You know what we're looking for, Mr. Leduc, so when you're available to bring that back, it's, I think council will be fine with that. We're good, Mr. Leduc?
I just like to fully comfort council that we're not putting this aside, so we are actively pursuing this project. As you also know, there's maybe 2 other projects that the council will need to be briefed on very shortly, which is servicing the industrial park and also the library issue. So I think from the administration perspective, there are many other elements to be considered.
Yes.
And not piecemeal every project because, yeah, as you've seen tonight, the borrowing capacity is a whole. And I think the decision has to be made in a whole with other projects or priority that will have to be set by council.
Yeah, definitely, I think council will have to set some priorities going forward. And I think personally for me, I'm the type of person, if I'm investing $1, I'd like to see at least $2 in return. And that's what the 417 Industrial Park has, is the potential to create new revenue streams that will actually pay for all the recreational improvements we're looking to do. So, if we can move forward without having the less impact possible on our residents, I think that's a well thought out plan. But that'll be a discussion for a later meeting. I thank you very much to council this evening, and I thank all the members of the public who are watching at home and who came to be present and listen to where we're going. As I said at the beginning, we rarely have people in the audience, so I'm glad that we have some people here tonight that are taking the time to find out what's going on in regards to this project. Move on, item 6, motion that council approves all recommendations listed on the agenda under item 4, reports from departments and council committees. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Conseiller Tarnowski, seconded by Conseiller Brisson. All those in favor? All those opposed? Carried. Confirming bylaw, that bylaw 2019-125 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of Corporation in the Township of Russell at its special council meeting held on August 20th, 2019, be read a first, second, and third time and passed. Moved by Councilor Lorrain, seconded by Councilor Saucier. All those in favor? All those opposed? Carried. Our next regular public meeting of council will be held on Tuesday, September 3rd, 2019. You guys are more than welcome to come back. We might not be discussing the complex that night, but you're more than welcome to come back. And at 9:12 p.m. we are adjourned. Thank you very much to everyone. Oh, and of course, thank you.